Tuesday, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel. Welcome to TechStrong TV. Today's Tuesday, November 24th. For many of you, you might have already started your Thanksgiving holiday. It seems every year we take more and more days off around Thanksgiving. It used to be just Thursday, then it was Thursday, Friday. Then people kind of stopped working Wednesday for the most part, and now the whole week seems to be a good, quiet week. It's a great week to catch up, though, on a lot of work that maybe has been piling up. Of course, this year there's no rules. So whether you're really hard at work or you're already just taking it easy, thanks for joining us. This will be our last show of fresh content before the holiday. We will not be broadcasting Thursday for Thanksgiving, and we'll return actually even next Monday. I think we are going to be replaying a best of show, and we'll be back with fresh content a week from today. So we'll see you next Tuesday after this. But for today, though, let's not give up, because we've got some great content for today. Let me tell you what we've got in store. I want to introduce you to a new company. Well, they've been around for about a year or so. It's called FrontEgg, Israeli company. I met with their CEO, Saji Rodin, and he's going to talk to us about FrontEgg, how they enable SaaS applications to accelerate their time to market and give them more insights and really help SaaS applications with a lot of information. So Sagi is going to tell us all about that. Then I have another Israeli company to introduce you to, Incredibuild. They've been around 20 years, though, and I met with their CEO, Tammy Shaker, and Dori Edelman, CTO. And Incredibuild has been giving sort of like supercomputer type of compute resources to enterprises on an as-needed basis, more than like just a cloud can or a cloud provider can. They've been doing it for a long time, too, as I mentioned, many, many years. I met up with their CEO, CTO, as I mentioned, and we'll hear how they're helping companies through this unusual times that we've been living in. After that, we're going to go back to DevOps Enterprise Summit, which was, it was DevOps Experience from October of this past year. And this is a panel we did on how complex enterprises are really evolving their DevOps tool chains and processes. It features Jeff Keys, Ted Yall, Sean Platty, and Benjamin Ferdoka, plus Ahmad Bacchus. So that should be a good one from DevOps Experience. After that, we'll turn things over to our Chief Content Officer, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene will give us the news around the DevOps, around the MediaOps sites today, as well as a good interview with, this is a tough one for me here, Sahashi, well, I'm going to let Charlene give you his name, but he's the VP of Digital Assurance and Quality Engineering at Capgemini. Charlene also has a great webinar preview. I'll be back after that to introduce Mitch over at the Analyst Corner, where Mitchell has the CEO of Movo, and they're going to discuss the evolution of digital payments and how COVID-19 has accelerated and cemented digital purchasing and processes. Then we have Mike Vizar, a double barrel of Mike Vizar today. Mike's going to have an interview with Travis Rehai, Vice President of Product Management at CloudCheck. And then from PSA, he's going to speak with Larry Gordon, CEO of XOps, a provider of IT services. So double barrel of Mike's channel roundup. And I'll be back to say goodbye. Great show. It's a great way to end this week for us. We're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back. Front Egg CEO and founder Saji Roden used to work at Checkpoint. While there, he saw the need that many SaaS application developers and vendors were in need of, right? What services that were holding them back, delaying things that would give them more insight. He developed Front Egg. It's been around, I think, a little over a year now, and it's doing some really great things for SaaS application providers. I'm going to let Sagi tell you more. Here's my interview with him.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. In this segment, we're going to tell you about a new company called Front Egg, or a new company to our audience anyway, called Front Egg. I have their CEO and founder with me, Sagi Roden. Sagi, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hi, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And you are coming to us from Israel today, yeah?
Right, straight from Tel Aviv, Israel.
Excellent. We hope all is well there. Sagi, as I mentioned, for our audience anyway, it's a new company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Front Egg and what you guys do and kind of background, the story on it?
Sure. So Front Egg is a platform for SaaS enablement. And eventually what we do is we offer a suite of essential pre-built and easily integrated SaaS product capabilities that empower dev and engineering teams to quickly build and modernize SaaS applications. The company was founded 1 year ago by me and Aviad, my co-founder. So we operate from Tel Aviv, Israel. The team currently consists of about 16 awesome developers, operation manager, engineers, and so on and so forth. So that's a bit on the background.
What about your background?
Yeah, so I think I'm a typical tech geek. Started to develop at the age of 15. Started from web development. So for me, kind of Front Egg is closing this loop. I think that throughout the most of my career, I've been around the worlds of web development, both at the front-end side of things and the back-end side of things, doing a lot of algorithms and databases as well. And in my last position, I actually managed R&D in a big company called Checkpoint. So I had the privilege to see this company and help it go through the digital transformation that it's going through. So yeah, started developing, moved quite fast to managing R&D, and formed Front Egg a year ago.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit, today everything is SaaS, right? Most applications are delivered via a SaaS model. And I think, whether it be the consumers or even businesses, we're used to, monthly monthly licensing fees and, service software as a service. I want to make sure what Front Egg is offering, it's not a one-off where each, every application that someone wants to make SaaSified, if that's a word, right? You don't do that as a one-off. You're creating a framework where many applications can move to a SaaS model without a lot of, individual customizations, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, so we can split this discussion into two types of companies, right? So we have companies that are delivering new products, and we have companies, as you said, that come in with old products, legacy, as they're typically called, and then they need to migrate them. So in both of these, you have some core and you want to build a product around that. So when we're speaking with innovators, whether it's in transitioning stages or when they're just building their initial product, we often hear that they have this great idea how to innovate, how to bring something new to the world. And on the practical side of things, when they start to bring this idea alive, they see that quick enough they start to build two applications. And that might sound weird, right? So why would they build two applications? So actually, if you go to a SaaS application today, you can see two main parts. The one part is the innovative part. It's the core, basically, the new thing, the part for which the customers pay the money. On the other side, you see the management stuff, right? So the experience will kind of look and feel the same among almost any SaaS application that you use today. So you will go to the application, you will experience an authentication process with some advanced stuff like SSO and multi-factor authentication. And then you will log in and you will see some dashboard, right? That's usually the first screen. And then you want to sign up for some kind of notifications to be notified upon business events that this specific app finds for you. And you want to subscribe to reports, right? So getting a weekly digest report is a very common experience in almost any SaaS application these days. And we haven't touched even the more advanced stuff of getting audit logs and doing third-party app integration to SIEM solutions and stuff like that. And if you think for a second on all of these topics that I just covered, none of them relates to the core value that this app is bringing to the world, right? We're speaking about customer-facing experiences that became de facto standard in what customers expect these days from almost any SaaS application. And then getting back to this two hemispheres of the SaaS brain, we kind of get a weird experience in which the founders need to invest in building this stuff instead of focusing their resources on the core value of their product. So another thing that we see there is something that we call the SaaS paradox. So if you decide not to invest in these things, you will lose customers, right? Because you cannot close the big deals, the big logos, because they kind of expect all these advanced enterprise features. And if you decide to invest and build these features, whether it's in-house or by adopting these components and then integrating them together, you will still lose customers because then you're shifting focus from your core to building these things, right? So you will lose on your core and the competition will win. And we at FrontEgg think ourselves as a platform that can change the way these things are being done and actually bring a transformation in these areas.
Excellent. And you're right. There's greenfield and brownfield, as they say, right? It's much easier if you're in a greenfield thing. But really, what sounds like FrontEgg is doing is you're providing a lot of the, lack of a better word, infrastructure around these SaaS apps that they all need. They're very common things like reporting and so forth. Now, does it make a difference where the application is hosted?
Yeah, so on the tech side, it's really simple. And sometimes when we speak to investors, when we raise the round, and even to friends, they ask us why now, right? So SaaS is like a thing for at least 10 years. And even before it was called SaaS, it was just called like B2B web applications, right? So it's not a new thing. So why now? But then if we go to the technical side of things, we see that the technology kind of adopted and enables companies like Frontend to do what they do. Because let's take like a few steps back into the past, like 15 years ago or even 10 years ago, and see where the web world, web development was heading to, right? JavaScript was like the wild, wild west of development. And if you were building a website, it would look differently in Chrome and in Internet Explorer, no standard at all. And on the backend side of things, a lot of frameworks. We haven't had like Kubernetes to run the production clusters. So a lot of fragmentation. And what we see in the last few years is kind of like a consolidation of standard in the technical aspect. So if you look at the front end, suddenly you see almost like, three technologies, three main frameworks, React, Angular, and Vue, that are kind of controlling this whole space. If you look at the backend, right, you have like backend fragmentation, but Node is kind of ruling the world, and then you see Go and Python-based frameworks. But then again, it's not like these million frameworks that you used to have. Running production, containers and Dockers on top of Kubernetes. Today, when we speak to customers, they look at us and say, yeah, of course, we run a cluster of Kubernetes, and it's not a problem. So all these technologies kind of brought a new standard of how to do things, and they enable us to come with these pre-built capabilities and get the assurance that the product that we're releasing could be easily integrated, easily customized, and also look good, essentially, because we're speaking about customer experience, and it must look good on almost any stack. So today we support almost any stack, whether it's front end and back end, and it's not a problem. And on the tech side, there's another shift that has happened, and this is the microservices shift, right? So you are now used to having, even if you're building everything in-house, these microservices, where each and one of those microservices kind of solves a problem in your infrastructure, or solves a problem for your product, right, in your business logic. So thinking about getting one of those microservices from an external vendor suddenly sounds like a legit decision, right? So you kind of offload the payment problem to Stripe, right? So it's like using the microservice of Stripe to solve your payment problem. And your search problems, you kind of offload them to Algolia. And there are more and more examples like that. So Frontend leverages this movement, right? So we kind of say, okay, audit logs, or the whole secure access experience within your application, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so you get a microservice and it can deal with this problem. Now, about the question on how you run, so Frontend today supports two modes. Basically, you can have these services managed by us in the cloud. Okay, so you don't have to deal with the load and with the security and scale. And or for more sensitive organization, you can take our Docker and just install it within your cluster. We support a Helm chart on Kubernetes, so you can just install a Helm chart on your Kubernetes and use it whether it's on your private cloud, or even have the ability to install it within your customer's environment, which is kind of a revolutionary way of thinking, because a few years ago companies tried to avoid that, right? To having to deploy.
Well, yeah, that was the whole point in SaaS, right? You didn't want to install software over there. You wanted it all here. But
Exactly.
but if you think about it, Sagi, that what you're describing runs very parallel to how applications themselves are built today, right? Most applications today, 70–80% of the actual code in the applications are really sort of open source components, or artifacts, binaries that are kind of glued together, right? So I'm trying to think. There was you want your app to kick off an email, right? There was SendGrid,
Yeah.
stuff like that. A lot of the libraries are just, we're reusing libraries for so much, which is good because it allows, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with every application. Especially if what you're trying to accomplish is something pretty common, right? You mentioned that Front Egg had raised some money. You want to share, if you can, don't obviously say anything you're not allowed, but what is the fundraising situation?
Yeah, so we're well funded. We got like the investment for our seed round in March this year. So it was led by Pitango Venture Capital with participation from i3 Equity and Global Founders Capital. We have the privilege to be backed by amazing investors that really support us throughout this amazing thing that we're building. The plans are now to expand. We did a launch a month ago, actually, like almost accurately, like a month ago, and we're getting a lot of traction since then. A lot of interest because people, before companies like Stripe, like Algolia, like LaunchDarkly, kind of, establish the standard that you don't have to build these things that they are solving in-house and you can just use them. People didn't know, right? So the default was to build this in-house. But once you kind of expose people to the concept that they can just plug and play capabilities that otherwise would have taken the focus from their team, it's it's something that is really addicting. And today we see that once people hear about the concept, even if they don't run and integrate these things in the next sprint, it stays in the back of their mind that, okay, this problem, it's solved for me. It's just a matter of time when I can deploy it, but basically it's solved, and I don't have to deal with it. So that's an awesome approach, and this is what we are trying to kind of bring to the world, and do some inception of the idea that some things are not worth dealing with, and you can just use solutions that exist out there and focus on innovation, focus on the core value that you're bringing, and we see that people really connect to the concept, connect to the idea.
Excellent. Sagi, we're almost out of time. We started talking and it just, is there any other news, anything you wanted to share with our audience? What's new at Front Egg?
So I can tell you, we started with solving experiences in the world of secure access. So kind of, going more than just bringing the solving the authentication problem, which is already solved in many other great products out there, but actually taking it one step further and solving the roles and permissions challenges and the API, external API management. And we focused on the notifications, handling the whole connectivity and the third-party integration. So if you need to add a webhook or a Slack capability to your product, you can do that right now. And we're expanding to more of these capabilities. And actually, people come to us, they see demos, they say, wow, amazing, I like that, but are you also planning to do that and that? And we are expanding to all of these concepts. And that's amazing, and we believe that we can actually change something in the world and make people innovate in a much easier and comfortable and efficient manner.
That's great. All right, for people who want to get more information about Front Egg, where do they go?
So they can come to us at frontech.com. They can sign up. It's a free sign up. We have a freemium plan. We're also giving back to the community. So we have a startups program where early stage companies that are bootstrapped or haven't raised much and are kind of pre-ARR can come to us and enjoy our growth plan, which is like really, really generous plan for up to a year for free. So today this is amazing, and actually we see young companies from all over the world. We have customers in almost 12 countries already, and we're just getting started. And they're using these programs. So come to us, and you'll never look back.
Fantastic. All righty. Sagi Roden, founder, CEO at FrontEgg here on TechStrong TV. Sagi, come back and tell us more soon, yeah? Keep us posted.
Alan, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Great time.
Okay. Be well, be safe. This is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
Next up, we have the team at Incredibuild. Incredibuild's been around a long time. They were providing supercomputing level compute resources before there was a public cloud, since there's a public cloud, and they continue to do so even more now, helping organizations during COVID and have access to that level of resources. I met with their CEO and CTO, Tammy Shakar-Dori Exelman, excuse me. And they're going to tell us more about what Incredibuild is doing and how it might be able to help your team. Here's my interview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here for another segment on TechStrong TV. We've got another company to introduce you to today that we haven't featured before on TechStrong TV. And it's one of my favorite parts of doing this is introducing new companies to you and companies that you may find really interesting. Today, we're going to interview and introduce you to Incredibuild. And we have with us Tammy Shakar and Dori Exterman from Incredibuild. Tammy, Dori, welcome. How are you?
Great. Always nice to see you.
Thank you. So, Tammy, let's assume our audience is not familiar with Incredibuild. They don't know. Tell us a little bit about the company. And if you wouldn't mind, as part of that, tell us a little bit of what's your role, your background, and then Dori, we're going to ask you to do the same.
Sure. So I'm Tammy. I'm the CEO of Incredibuild. I joined about a year ago. And I was very excited about joining Incredibuild because, like some of your audience, I wasn't familiar with the company. But after meeting with the founders and Dori, I got really excited. As Incredibuild is a company, we tackle the biggest problem in the industry today, which is time to market. And what we do is we accelerate software and the development part of it from the development to the release. Softwares like builds, compilation, testing across different platforms. We work with companies like Microsoft, Adobe, Nintendo, Epic, across different industries. And we help these companies accelerate everything which is time consuming on the dev process. I think the technology ties into the biggest problems that the market has in two areas. One is the market expectation from companies to deliver more quality, more features, and do it faster all the time without compromising. And the second time, the complexity of the software that requires a lot of time-consuming processes on the way to the release. And this is where Incredibuild came in. So very excited about it, and maybe Dori can add about the magic of how we do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm 10 years in Incredibuild, and I can't get enough of the magic behind the technology. I'm a tech geek for many years, 25 years in the industry. And I was always fascinated by the way that Incredibuild does this magical thing that it does. So just to give you, to bring you up, on how we do it and what it is that we're doing. So essentially, we are turbocharging and we accelerate many different tasks as part of the development process, whether it's compilation, testing, and luckily for us, there are a lot of these kind of high throughput, complex, time-consuming processes as part of a dev process, and make it run much faster by seamlessly and concurrently distribute all these processes that these tasks, these workloads consist of across many idle CPUs in hosts that you already own in your local network, or if you don't have enough of them, in the public cloud. So essentially our technology effectively transform each of these compute nodes, whether it's developers nodes or CI/CD nodes, into a supercomputer with hundreds or thousands of cores and gigs of memory, and radically shorten the compute time that it takes to solve these huge problems, whether it's compilation, testing, and others. I think that important thing is that from a user's perspective, it's really as if his execution times can drop when it's being executed on a 2,000 core supercomputer. IncrediBuild allows him to harvest these CPUs across his network seamlessly, and that's magical.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So IncrediBuild's been around 10 years, right? Well, thereabout. Let's talk about like the different aspects of development that it accelerates and how it does it, right? So our audience and like in DevOps today, right? We have this kind of left to right paradigm, right? Where we plan, we start coding, we test, we deploy, post-deployment, left to right. Where does IncrediBuild start on that kind of road? How far left, if you will, does IncrediBuild come in?
Yeah, I think, and I'll let Dori after get into details, but we started, at the developer. In the beginning of times, we worked with the developers, and it was waterfall time. The guy could start a build, let it run at night, come back the next day. And through time, you saw that everything became that you want to run, everything became agile, and you have a build per commit, and everything's running a lot quicker. But then the shift left of getting more done, that trend is coming very strongly now. And we are part of that trend by having the ability to do it quicker then. And when it arrives to the CI/CD area, it's already in a higher quality, and the whole cycle becomes much, much, much quicker.
Excellent. Dori, you want to add?
Yeah, I think that it made sense to start with developers 20 years ago when IncrediBuild started. Release automation, CI/CD wasn't a thing. So that's where the thing was the developers. But our customers are the top developers and release managers in the world today. We're working with the largest companies, and they always took us throughout the years to where they needed us the most. So it made sense for them. Once we were able to accelerate a developer's compilation from an hour to 5 minutes, once they adopted CI/CD practices and release automation, it made sense to bring IncrediBuild to the build node as well. So of course we started by the developers, but then the customers themselves took us to their CI/CD and release automation. And due to the fact that our unique technology allow organization to use us for any kind of compute-intensive workloads, and there are tons of these in the CI/CD process. You're speaking about compilation and testing and code analysis and code signing and packaging and compression and encoding, and all these things take time. They actually took us and used us for any of these time-consuming processes, because IncrediBuild allow you to kind of use, custom use it for any of your workloads. And they kind of found where they can do that, and they did it themselves because they are technical people. And that was the traditional, but later they even took us to post-production in some scenarios when you're looking at financial institutions. So you start with developing some kind of, financial simulations or Monte Carlo simulation and modeling. you start by developing them and then you test them, but then you need to run them. And you have a lot of things that are high throughput computing in post-production, and Incredible is being used to accelerate these as well. So whether you speak about financial institution or CAD/CAM simulations or Monte Carlo and risk analysis, or if you're looking at the gaming industry, you have a lot of rendering and asset creation and shader compile, which you can say it's kind of anywhere between the development and also in the post-production itself. So that's what we're seeing.
Excellent. So, I mean, what it sounds like is Incredible is allowing, whether it's a developer or a CD DevOps team or even ops SRE folks, post, it's allowing them to leverage an amplified, a more beefed up, infrastructure, which allows you to speed up your computing needs. But let me just play devil's advocate. Can't we do that with the cloud today? Doesn't elasticity in the cloud allow me to do that without using an Incredibuild?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think that this is exactly where we even have more added value, because, when you move to the cloud, it seems like you have endless compute power, right?
Right.
But first of all, it's very expensive. Cloud is, it's not your own on-prem build farms that you can use or utilize the way you want it. You pay for every moment you're on the cloud, and large machines cost a lot of money. And the idea that you can do the same by taking smaller machines, but harnessing them together, again, to get that huge core power, and having the ability to, the elasticity of going up and down with smaller machine and getting your workload done, and even using, things like spot instances in order to make it even more commercial. So I think we have a commercial impact, very strong one on the cloud, together with the technical ability, again, to do things quicker and in a more efficient way.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, when you're looking
makes
at,
sense to me.
Yeah, because especially in scenarios when you're looking at builds, for example, and you want to be the fastest possible, and you're going to invest in 256 core machine in the cloud to be as fast as possible. A build is not, will not consume all these 256 cores all the time. It will consume one core, and then we'll need 2,000 cores, and then we'll drop down to 8, but you'll pay for 256 the entire time. With Incredible Cloud, you have the elasticity. You can start with an 8-core machine. Incredible will scale you just when you need to 2,000 core, and will bring you back down to 8 when you don't need this. So you get both cost savings, because you don't need to pay for the entire duration when you're using, while at the other end, you get the optimized performance, because when you need these 2,000 cores, you will not be able to break the boundary of the 256 available core cloud machine that you have. And with Incredible, you can. So it's more of Incredible is an enabler to reduce your costs in the cloud while getting the best performance out of it. And that's why we see a lot of our customers using this in order to accelerate their CI/CD in the cloud the most, but also other scenarios as well.
Excellent. If you don't mind, I want to turn things, every interview we do, you got to mention COVID and what effect it's had on the economy, on our world, and in the tech industry. And quite frankly, thank God, in the tech industry, we've been rather insulated. There's a lot of people who suffer, not just with health, but from an economic point of view, right? But how has COVID pandemic, has it had any effect with Incredible, and what has that been?
So I think, first of all, Incredible used to have a work from home day every week. Tuesdays were from home. So the company and the employees were used to having the ability to work from home, which is great. So when we moved to 100% working from home for the time that we were in quarantine, the company already had the know-how, which was great. And on the other side, the markets that we tap into for example, the gaming, and AAA gaming is one of our strong markets. I spoke about companies like Nintendo and Epic and Microsoft and others. Those actually boomed during the pandemic time because, you know, this industry was something that helped all of us at home make it easier. And so they had really huge demands. And in the same time, the cloud technology became important. And I think the fact that we came in ready with a cloud solution, together with the ability that we had in terms of working from home, it helped us. And I think that, you know, we had quite a lot of success. And I'm very careful when I say it because we don't know how things are going to evolve. But it worked quite well with our DNA as a company and the DNA of our markets. And I think, you know, we need to continue and find great solutions for working from home to improve, you know, those who have smaller ability in terms of cloud and are working on-prem through VPNs and other solutions. And we're trying all the time to work to find solutions. And an interesting case study is a company called Milestone, which is an Italian game studio. And they're doing motor kind of gamings and motorcycles and cars. And they were about to launch, and Italy were the first one who went into quarantine. And then came to us and they said, listen, we gotta get that game out. You know, we can't wait. And together with them, we worked, you know, with, you know, not pretending business as usual, creating work groups and not emails, you know, working VPN smart and automating what we can. But they launched the game during quarantine in Italy. Really? So it's an interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine, you know, as companies are doing remote working from home, they look for these incredible kind of solutions because, quite frankly, they don't have time, right? Exactly. They got to get anything they could do that's going to accelerate development, accelerate testing, accelerate deployment, right? Is kind of a, you know, very much appreciated right now. It's, you know, very valuable. So now, incredible Israeli-based company, yes. Any other offices around the world? Or
yeah. So the company indeed was formed in Israel. And this is where we have most of our employees. We have an office in Tokyo, Japan, and in Chengdu, China. Both were at the time initiated because of the gaming industry, which is very strong, and that is where Incredible started. As I said, today we are, you know, across industries like embedded and banking. So we work globally, but we started and we're very strong in gaming, and we have a very warm heart toward this industry. And we also have plans to open a US office this year. It was a bit delayed because of COVID, but about 40%.
Don't rush.
I heard Florida is lovely these days.
It is beautiful here. Well, we had a lot of rain, but the COVID is
it's hard.
It's hard.
But we definitely need an office in the US. 40% of our customers are US based. And I think the industry of the large software companies is definitely there. So it's true that, you know, like we're having this interview right now, Zoom is great, but there is nothing that will replace that proximity to your market. And this is the plans for the coming months, is to open a US presence as well. Hopefully,
well, they're saying hopefully by April we'll start rolling out vaccines widespread, and I'm hopeful maybe by May or June, you know, we can start getting back to some sort of whatever the new normal will be. And,
it's true,
and then,
but I think, again, looking at our industry, and you know, we said it before and you said it, at the end of the day, most of the companies we're talking about, you know, smaller studios, which were home-based in any event in the past, medium companies like us, which, you know, to adapt to working from home was not hard. But if you look even at the giants, I was surprised how, in a way, easily they, you know, got settled in their home offices, got a nice background. And when you speak to, you know, very senior people in Microsoft today from their living room, you know, business continues. And
absolutely. Well, yes. in the tech industry, business continues because we were already using incredible cloud, digital transformation was already underway. But, I will tell you, and I don't say it out loud to many of my friends outside of work, if you're not in an industry that was kind of used to this, was already going on this, it's very hard. It's very hard for them to kind of get the thing. I have friends in the financial industry and in other industries where, working from home, they were still on desktops, right? They were on desktops. They didn't have laptops.
Yeah,
It is a challenge.
Excuse me. So they're on their phones at home still, right? So many companies had to give the computers to people to take home, or they're working on their daughter's computers or whatever. And so I think in the tech industry, we look at that like, what, are you kidding me? That's not real, but it is real for them. And unfortunately, there's a lot of suffering that goes with it. But anyway, guys, we're running out of time. You know what we didn't tell anyone? What's the website?
So the website, by the way, is incredible.com, and it's a great, by the way, we just came out with a new branding, and our customers right now are busy in an egg hunt that we did in the new website in order to find all kinds of anomalies, and they're in for great prizes, but that's just for our customers for now. But I do encourage you to walk in. It's a lot of information in our website. And a lot of case studies from every industry, from the financial industry, from the automotive, embedded, gaming, mapping, really different, types of technologies. And I think you'll have a nice time. And, we hope that we get to see people in person at some point and not only through the Zoom.
You and me both. By next summer. That's I'm praying for, but we'll hope for the best. All right. Dory, Tommy, thank you for joining us and telling us all about Incredibuild. Continued success. Look, when you come open an office in the US, maybe we'll see you in person, unless I come to Israel. I'm hoping Israel maybe by next Rosh Hashanah or something like that, around that time.
We'll be very happy to host you, and we really appreciate the time you took to speak to us this morning very much.
My pleasure. It's nice meeting you both. Good luck. Okay, Incredibuild. Go check them out. They're a 20-year-old overnight success story. Thanks for joining us. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Next up is something old from our recent DevOps experience. It's a panel on how complex enterprises are really evolving their DevOps teams, tools, value streams. It's a panel discussion with Jeff Keys, Ted Yall, Sean Plati. Let's see who else we have here. Benjamin Fedora and Ahmad Bacchus. I think you'll enjoy it. Here now is the panel.
Welcome to this session of the DevOps experience, where we're going to have a panel discussion around real-life organizations solving complex problems in evolving DevOps practices and some of the discoveries, challenges, and learning experiences from people that have been doing this for a long time. I'm excited about this because everybody here has got a lot of experience in actually dealing with this transformation that they've been going through. And not only do they have experience doing it, they have experience doing it in big, complex enterprises with governance, compliance, regulatory issues, lots of legacy and culture to boot. So it's a lot of fun. Before we get started, I want to go around and just introduce the people on the panel today. My name is Jeff Keyes. I'm the VP of Product at Batora. We're a value stream management platform. We help people through this journey of transformation. And in my journeys of having these conversations, I came across these fantastic individuals that you're going to get to hear from today. First on the list is Benjamin. Do you want to tell us about yourself, Benjamin?
Sure. I'm Benjamin Fedorka. I'm a lead software designer at Jackson National Life Insurance. We're on the continuous delivery enablement team. We call ourselves the code team. And our goal is whatever your tech stack is, whether you're going to do cloud native Docker or cloud native Kubernetes, or going out to the mainframe or going out to virtual machines, we're going to help you move your code safely and with managed risk.
Awesome. Ted, we've chatted a number of times, and I've heard a lot of things. Give us a little background on you, Ted.
Right. So I started my career, Ted Ewell. I'm a senior principal engineer at Optum, driving DevOps across healthcare platforms. I started my career in the telecommunications space at both Nortel and Avaya, and 5 years ago, I switched to healthcare, and it's been a blast. Bringing some of the DevOps and some of the lessons learned into this new space.
Awesome. Very good. Well, Ahmad, I've had a lot of fun with my time with you. Give us some of your background and experience in DevOps.
Yeah. Hi, guys. My name is Ahmad Bacchus. So I work at Health First. I'm within the application development space, focused mostly around DevOps, and one of the things that, the team, and Sean is going to extend on this as well because we work together. One of the biggest focus that we have within our team is enabling DevOps inside of the organization, right? So whether it's CI/CD, development best practices, it really is just enabling DevOps within the organization. So this is a pretty big space for us.
Awesome. And last but not least, Sean, I love your wisdom as you comment on things. Give us some background about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Sean Plathy. I manage the infrastructure side. So I'm kind of the infrastructure to Ahmad's development within our DevOps enablement team, and really focused around AWS cloud, immutable infrastructure, serverless, and kind of taking the whole CI/CD journey to really building infrastructure as code as opposed to just focusing purely on the app dev part of it. So between the two of us, we really make kind of one full brain when it comes to DevOps.
Yeah, I hope that comes across clear. Sean and Ahmad, we definitely have the DevOps happening from Health First, and the collaboration is instantly apparent. So, well, let's dive in because, I feel like with most people I talk to, and we talk about a DevOps journey, and the first thing they think is CI, and all they really, think they've got to do is implement Jenkins and they're done. But before we get into all that, because that's where people go to, I want to talk about, what got us here. When you were thinking about DevOps, when you were thinking about the issues that you were facing in organizations, and maybe, Sean, I'm going to actually start with you. Like, what kind of were the things that you were fighting with that were like, oh man, we got to do something different? What problems did you have?
Yeah. Well, one of the key things I think kind of early on, so I joined the organization about 3 years ago. And as I was joining, there's a big push to eliminate waste, eliminate a lot of these automated or these manual processes and kind of convert them to automated. And I think, as we came in, there was a lot of things that were being done where people were scripting, people were looking at ways to automate those manual workflows. But it was being done kind of in a context of just focus on get the software out the door, automate, build the scripts. It wasn't really focused on how do we use the concepts of CI/CD and how do we use those things in that technology space to make sure that we're sending the right code out, make sure it's packaged properly, make sure it's tested properly. Make sure that security checks have been done against it. All those things that we've kind of evolved over the last couple of years, learning and developing out. I would say that was kind of our core challenge. A lot of people think that CI/CD and enablement in that regard is just automate code and get it out the door. What we've discovered in our journey, that was kind of a problem in the early phase is this concept of just automate is okay. It helps, but it created a lot more problems in the back end where code packages weren't making it out the door with the right code. Things that we didn't expect to be in the code package would suddenly sneak in and make its way to prod. So in the early phases, when Ahmad and I kind of started this journey, we found that the good intentions kind of bit us in the butt.
Gotcha. Ted, I know a fair bit about your history. Help us, feel and experience some of the pain you were struggling with back at Optum.
Absolutely. So when I joined 5 years ago, we were right in the middle of what's called an agile transformation, which everybody understands now. We had formed up into 4 Scrum teams, less than 8 to 10 people, 4 to 6 dev and 2 to 3 QA. Scrum Master, a PO, engineering manager. So we had 4 teams. We had moved from waterfall and we had brought in an agile coach. And at that time, we were delivering 5 times a year, so 5 big releases a year. And I think one of the good things we did is keep good metrics. And I can talk about that, but after about 18 months of that, we were doing better. Our defects were coming down. But we hadn't really embraced the concept of DevOps yet. And so we brought in another coach, Gary Groover, which you may have heard of. He's pretty well known in the industry. Our CEO brought him in, and we were a trailblazing team at Optum. And he introduced us to Gary. And that was really a good move for us because he introduced the ideas of Docker and containers and quality gates. And so we really embraced that. And after our first steps, the first things we did was we'd convert our VMs to OpenShift containers, to Kubernetes containers. We converted our Jenkins pipeline to declarative from imperative. We integrated our ATDD tests. We built Cucumber tests. We wrote scripts. We automated them. We ran them daily, and we added quality gates to the process. So.
You just dove right in, like we're just going to follow the process because this is what's good. We'll get to more of that.
Right. I'll tell you though. I'll just say you're right. We did it. We did everything right, but it turns out to be we did too much all at once.
All good. Benjamin, give us some of your pain points that you were struggling when you're like, we've got to do something different. What were you guys struggling with?
Yeah, so like Ted, our processes had slowed down. We basically ground to a halt. We were doing 4 to 5 quarterly releases every year. And although we would regression test our code, we would spend 3 months on that. But that wasn't just what we were doing because there were stages in that pipeline before then, which meant that basically our latency had gotten to a best case of 9 months. And most things was actually spreading out to 15 months. And the breaking point for me was we're sitting in a all hands meeting for the IT department. And I can't say exactly who, but somebody whose title started with a C came in and made a joke to our CIO about how slow our department was. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was we have to do something else. So that was also aligned with the agile transformation that we were going in. So that was the start of it, but really we also had to change our practices for CI/CD and also increasing transparency and monitoring.
Understood. You mentioned a tipping point, a breaking point. Ahmad, I didn't pick on you. I know some of the pain that you struggle, but for you, what was your personal tipping point where like, I don't want to do what I've been doing anymore? What was your point that happened?
That's me. I think for me, it's really more on the application development side, right? So as you embrace this whole agile concept, right, and practice, I've been with Health First for over 9 years, and I started as a developer doing .NET development. And then all of a sudden we started using things like Salesforce and MuleSoft and Pega, and then the organization went into Agile. But then there's a lot of problem that came along with that, right? And one of the biggest problem for me, or tipping point at least, is the teams, right? Is really just re-architecting applications to fit that model, right? I mean, you've got applications that were designed as a monolith because there was no CI/CD, there was no concept concept of Agile, everybody was making changes, and they were large changes that were being deployed once a month. And so really just working through defining standards, understanding how to refactor an application and break it down into line of business oriented. We're sort of like a microservice concept. But that was, I think for me, that was one of the biggest challenge.
Gotcha. Well, let's get into like let's talk about, how you guys did it. Because you guys are in the process well, first of all, raise your hand if you're completely done with your DevOps journey. Yeah, I didn't think so.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, it's never over, is it? But what were the first steps? And just kind of going through that process. And Ted, you kind of talked about that. You want to kind of dive through those first steps of what you got from Gary?
Okay, right. So the first thing we really learned is there's no one way to do DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, each team has different technology stacks, different skill sets, different compliance requirements that really prevents a top-down tooling approach that everybody can follow this process. And it's a little bit different than Agile, where Agile and scaled Agile, everybody tries to follow a pretty similar process. At least I think of DevOps as being different. But the one thing that we did do that was good and is keep very good metrics. So we kept track of things like our time to build, our time to value, and particularly our defects. We said any defect that's found in stage are the defects we're concerned about. We don't mind defects being found as part of sprint work, as part of Scrum work, where QA is looking over the shoulder at Dev and pointing things out, and Dev is fixing it on the fly. We don't track those, but keeping good defects, and then allows you then to form a pattern. But what the things that we did, we talked about a little bit, is embracing some new technology. So, we jumped in, we shifted to OpenShift, which was great. You want to have containers. You want to just embrace container technology. You want to be able to build your images, Docker images, and deploy them anywhere. And that's easier said than done because of the way of config orchestration. So the things to do, what I would say just to end this segment is you want to have a very good understanding of your end-to-end flow and look for waste and inefficiencies in your process where you have the waste and inefficiencies, and then you want to have a plan that you put in place to address those with an end goal in mind. And for us, we started out delivering 5 times a year, but the way we did it was each team would sprint for 4 sprints, so 8 weeks, and then the entire 100% of the team, all 4 teams, would stay back and harden the release for a month. And we labeled. I told Gary, I said that's waste. That if we had shifted left and doing this correctly, we would be done. We would be ready to deploy after the 4th week, after the 4th sprint. And yet we're spending the entire team for a month to harden the release. And so that's where we started. That was a starting point. Identified that huge bucket of waste and figured out systems and steps to help us shift left.
Yeah, I really like the way you said it. And the whole reason why I wanted to have a panel here is because everybody, has their own journey of how went through adopting DevOps. So Benjamin, let me go over to you with, give me your first steps and how you got started.
Yeah, so we had kind of a similar experience again. We thought technology was going to save us here. So back in late 2018, we set up our first Kubernetes clusters. We started bringing apps over to Kubernetes. And the first thing we learned was that we weren't any faster. Because when you actually went and looked at, that value stream of getting, an idea into running code in production, it wasn't the technology that was causing the problem. It was our internal processes. So we stopped and we said, okay, well, how do we start working on this? And what we came up with was we decoupled our technology stacks from our CI/CD processes and also started working on the internal governance and the manual processes. And at this point, we're actually as fast deploying to Kubernetes as we are going out to virtual machines, because we recognize that at the speed we're going with our internal processes, it's not the technology, it's the humans that we needed to build that trust with.
You bet. So decoupling it from the CI/CD. Sean, Ahmad, let's start with you, Sean, because you always have some great insights on this topic. Give me your as you go back through that CI/CD journey and your DevOps journey. How'd you get started?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, the conversation with leadership was, they understood CI/CD, they understood the premise. We wanted to attack it as an organization, and for us, it was about trying to find where that easy win is. There's a lot of at our organization, there's a lot of applications out there, many different types of frameworks, and there's a lot of money invested in them. So it's kind of hard to come back to the business and say, well, if you were doing this in containers, this would be really easy to CI/CD. So because you're not, we're not going to do it. Right. We decided, let's build a framework, let's build a standard, let's build something we can reuse potentially in other platforms. And then from that, adapt those concepts and principles and kind of build to the point earlier, governance controls around how does the code promotion process work? How do we take this from dev hands to actually real prod? So we picked an application framework that was relatively easy to CI/CD that already existed in the environment. We started to build our processes and learn, what makes good CI, what makes good deployment, what makes good repeatable capabilities here. And started to expand on that. And that was really the eye opener for us, because we were able to kind of experiment and understand in a perfect world, what does it look like? And then figure out with some of those more legacy applications that, again, the business just can't get away from because there's a tie to it, for right or wrong, right? That how do we adopt these same concepts on those, maybe not as efficiently as something like a container stack, but at least something, very similar in the gating process.
Absolutely. Ahmad, on the dev side, what'd you guys do in this process?
Yeah, for us, it was a little bit more dated from Sean's experience. This is going back 6 years ago. We made a huge investment in Salesforce and MuleSoft, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest challenges that we had was deployments. Right. I mean, how do you deploy Salesforce code and make sure that the MuleSoft APIs were deployed? And Pega was also around the corner. And so the starting point for us to even look at CI/CD was around the deployments, right? And we were having 16, 17 deployments every Friday night, right? And each of those deployments were taking about 15 to 20 minutes. Right. And so we started, scratching our heads, and we're like, it's got to be an easy way to do this. Right. And so we've made an investment with Jenkins at the time with CloudBees, and we started building pipelines to deploy MuleSoft code. And then we started running into some challenges where we weren't able, we got into a situation where we were delivering MuleSoft code, but Salesforce was sort of behind because we didn't have a pipeline for Salesforce. Right. So for us, it was really more of trying to cut the deployment time down. And so the way we solved this is by building those pipelines, orchestrating them together. And we were able to go from having 15, 20 deployments on Friday to maybe having 50 if we want. And it only takes about 15 minutes because there was no one actually doing them.
Nice. Very nice. So here's all the first steps are great. Let me ask for lack of a better word, the gray hair question. What do you wish you would have known before you got started down that path? And I don't want to go around, but Sean, you smiled the most, so
you're going to pick on me. It's a point that Ted made earlier. It's metrics and measures. What are we doing this for? I think for us, we intrinsically knew that CI/CD, that DevOps, that agile practices are going to make us better. They're going to make us more resilient. They're going to make us faster. But quantifying it was the really hard thing because, for us as engineers and for us as people who are hands in and hands on all this stuff, the value's clear, and it doesn't really take go show me the graph difference, go show me the charts. It wasn't until we got in deeper conversation with some of our senior leaders who they get it, right? They know this is valuable, but they're like, show me how much more valuable. Because I want to from the mountaintops shout how good you guys have done and what you've been able to contribute back to the business in terms of manpower that the business now has that it didn't originally have. And we kind of were challenged by that to say, well, how can we tell? I know it's better, it's better, but how can we tell you how much better it is? And that's been a little bit of a struggle in our journey of figuring out how do we go back after the fact and fit those metrics in and make sure we're tracking the right things and reporting the right things. So, we've gone back and forth in terms of some of the intangibles, some of the tangibles, building some of the capabilities. Worked great with you guys a little bit too on, finding out how to eke those KPIs and those measures out of our tool sets and pull them into our upstream system so that we can start representing that back.
Absolutely. So I hear that consistently. Ted, you talk about metrics. I want to see metrics. Sean, you talk about metrics. I've heard the adage, you can't manage what you don't measure. And the next step of that, well, you can't improve what you don't measure. Well, I don't know if that's true. You could probably improve it, but as you pointed out, Sean, you can't actually verify that you improved it because you can't prove it.
Yeah, it's all instinct.
It's all instinct. I think it's better. So you spent how much on tooling, and is it better? I don't know. Seems like it. So.
And the big thing here is pick a small number of metrics that matter. If you have 70 metrics, then they're going to be all over the place. You don't know what you're going to focus on. So that's where you want a small number. Now, you also want to pick ones that matter. One of my least favorite metrics is how many deployments are using the newest version of the pipeline. I can tell you that, but what really matters here is what value they delivered. What was the latency? How many times they're deploying? Where are the failures being caught?
Right, and what you choose to measure, you will improve, and what you don't measure likely won't be improved. And so, pick a small number, and really have a goal. Have it, and I really bring it back to the waste. Identified the waste and efficiency or friction, you may call it, in the pipeline. This is what we're going to go after, and this is how we're going to measure it. As far as something else that I would add in addition to metrics is that what we learned is that teams or just humans in general don't really respond well to mandates from above telling them. Okay. And what we learned also is reminded that developers are ingenious, and if you give them, they can gamify anything. If you give them a metric to hit, they can find ways to work around it. And you want to have, you're going to measure my lines of code. Okay. Game on. I'm going to have the most lines of code in the company. Mm-hmm. And then we added quality gates, and we sort of thought, okay, now we got it. We have a quality gate. The developers will have to meet this quality, and then we're going to protect our stage. But simply just adding a quality gate doesn't automatically lead to higher quality software, and it kind of boils back to culture. You need to get buy-in. And you need to get skin in the game from the teams. You need to engage them early so that they understand why you put a quality gate in that, and they viewed it as just an obstacle that they had to figure out how to get around because they had to get their work done. And we bypassed that buy-in step where they needed to understand why we have a quality gate shifting us left, protecting our stage. And one tool that we came up with is really to work the retrospectives and not just, you can't mandate them, but you have to show why they should be nervous if they didn't have a retrospective. We want everybody to be very curious about why a defect was found in stage and think about it. What could we have done? Why did we certify this feature as ready for stage? And yet the defect happened. And we'd come from a point where, well, actually another team would fix that defect. So the person who made the defect didn't even know potentially that he ever made a mistake. So we embrace shift left and retrospectives, but you got to engage the teams and it gets to the culture.
Gotcha. So some of the things I'm hearing is, metrics matter. Don't have it come from top down. Certainly don't manage by metrics. Engage the team. Impact the culture through that engagement, evaluate your process, looking for inefficiencies. Well, any other things you wish you would have known before you got started?
Yeah, I'd add to that. One of the things that I would add to that is the whole collaboration piece, right? As DevOps stated, people, process, and tools. And sometimes organizations start from the tools and then go up to the people, right? Right. And I think one of the lessons learned, at least personally for me, is to make sure that you're collaborating with your teams, especially when you're in a large organization where there may be multiple teams working in different parts of the organization, working on the same technology, right? So if you're about to do CI/CD because there was an ask for, let's say, a LAMP stack, right? Mm-hmm. And you did it, and then you haven't really collaborated enough with all the other teams that's working with it, then you go, man, I wish I knew the other teams were using it differently because now it might not work for what we're doing, right? So I think one of the biggest thing is really making sure that you collaborate well, understand the people in the organization, and really just understand what the processes are.
Cool. So we've talked about a number of the areas. But I wanted to just have some addressing some of the areas. So when you talk about infrastructure, what's the general advice? How do I address infrastructure in my DevOps transformation? I know, Ted, you comment on some of that, but I'd love to get some comments on each of these areas. Talk about infrastructure. How do we deal with it?
Yeah, I can jump in. I'll add something there. So in my opinion, we always like to go into an immutable world, right? Where everything is sort of immutable, because when you install an application, let's say, for example, Java, right? Java has the garbage collector, and there's quite a few things that can happen with memory and all that, right? So having an immutable infrastructure makes it very clean. It makes it very predictable. And also, you can always roll back something, right? If you version it properly. Mm-hmm. So I think immutable infrastructure, in my opinion, would be one of the top things there.
Cool.
Yeah, so declarative and transparent. Just like we just said, you need to be able to recreate it from nothing. So that way, if it goes wrong, you apply the cattle, not pets philosophy. If it's sick, figure out why it's sick, replace it. Don't worry about that. The other big thing here is transparency. If your developers are using a platform and they can't see things, or they're asking another team to go change a setting for them, that's got a couple problems. One, they don't really know what the setting is, and two, they can no longer self-service on the infrastructure. So at whatever layer you have your delivery teams interacting with your infrastructure, whether that's provisioning the VMs or whether that's working up at Kubernetes where they're talking about pods and containers, make sure that's a well-defined thing that they have access to self-service.
Right.
Excellent.
And infrastructure goes hand in hand with your config orchestration. So immutable is just the name of the game. Scalability and the ability to build an image that doesn't have infrastructure tied to it. I mean, so many problems will come about because you have, and it all gets down to that. Well, it works on my machine. Why doesn't it work on your machine? And Docker containers solve that issue. But in order to take it to the next level, you want to orchestrate the configuration. So you have code, you have your configuration and your content that are all married together seamlessly and can flow through your pipeline and land on each environment. And you never have a situation where, well, it works in stage 1, it fails in stage 2. The reason that is because you don't have that immutability, and you have configuration that's built in at build time instead of at deploy or runtime.
Absolutely. I think all of us have had this beaten into our heads enough, like, oh man, now that I see it, it's like, ta-da. So if this is news to you, it's like one of the first areas to look at. Well, what about code movement? How do we, you talked about that a bit, Ahmad, from deployments, but what are we changing about how the code moves from place to place?
Yeah, I think for me personally is, one of the things before, we move code from place to place, right? As Ted mentioned, is being able to promote things, right? Not rebuild them in different environments, right? Mm-hmm. So build once, deploy many, right? It's a principle we follow where we say, hey, if there is a code that is built, we're not going to rebuild it to deploy to a QA environment or a production environment, right? Because an example would be, let's say, for example, React, right? So you have a React application that has, 25, 30 modules that is being pulled down from the public internet to build as part of your code. And those are known as open source dependencies. But the problem is that those dependencies themselves has versions, right? And so if you're building an application right now as a developer and you decide to move it into a dev environment using the CI process, and you build the code by doing it like an npm install, mm-hmm. The npm install is going to pull down whatever dependencies or whatever versions of that dependency is at that time, right? And if you redo the build every time you deploy, that means that your dependencies are changing and you're missing the opportunity to validate and test them, right? So build once, deploy many, or build once and deploy to any environment is definitely one of the biggest positives on this section for me.
Something else that we've done is code advances by default. So under our old world, you would create a package and then you would click, I want to deploy this to test. And then if you wanted to deploy that to integration, then you would go and you select my version from a dropdown, integration from a dropdown, and click there. And you do that for any environment that you wanted to go off to deploy to. So with our new declarative pipelines, everything moves forward by default. So if you've passed all your tests so far, then either automatically or waiting for human prompt, it says, hey, are you ready to go to integration? Hey, are you ready to go to production? Wherever you need to go. So that way we're really encouraging developers to continue pushing that code forward as it passes tests.
Absolutely. So I think, thank you. Those are great topics. As we get into the next steps, they get a little more controversial because it's a little more, it depends on where you're from and what the organization looks like. I'll bring up the mega bad change management process. So talk to me about how you're morphing that in your organization, because all of you work at organizations that have compliance and change management is certainly a part of the process. So how do you evolve that?
Yeah, I have some pretty good thoughts there. I mean, the big thing, we talk about DevOps as people, process, tools. It doesn't just stop with the dev teams or the infrastructure teams or the QA teams. Part of the people, process, tools also involves change management. I mean, we've had the luxury of having a really good change management team who understands, we got to figure out where the lines in the sand are, right? If you're it's called an older mode app where you're not following a lot of these newer processes and standards, your gate to production is going to be a longer gate. It's going to be a longer process. But if we see, and I say we colloquially, like the change management team, the change management team sees that you're onboarding some of these practices and you're doing automated testing and you're doing automated validation and you're doing build once, deploy many, and you have infrastructure as code. And a lot of these are the processes and principles. You start to build kind of a rapport, essentially, the best way I could say it, with your level of defect to production. And once that starts to build up, then confidence can build up and you can shift those people into different types of change schedules. I don't envy the change management team because they got to coordinate a lot of different change all at the same time. But I think where once you can explain the value to them of, you don't really got to look at these apps as much anymore, because these apps that have been brought into this mode are now a little more trustworthy. They're not the ones where you're worried. They're going to be the ones that cause that 3 a.m. call where 5 different teams have now train wrecked into one problem. They're going to be the ones who are going to get called because somebody else was the problem, if anything. So really the big thing is building that relationship with them, I think, and letting them know that this process is here not just to help the dev teams and the infrastructure teams and the QA teams. It's also to help your release management organization and make sure that can be a much more streamlined process.
Yeah, right. I was going to say exactly the same thing Sean said is, if the best practice is to look for the friction in your pipeline, extend that through the entire pipeline. Look at the waste and inefficiencies in your change management process. Now that we have these immutable objects that have been automated testing and you can trust them, how does that simplify the change management? Take it up, abstract it up to the next level, and get to the point where it's not like every release you're going to the moon, right? You got to account for the moon rocks. I mean, in the shuttle, so the weight is distributed. Try to get to the level where you can automate many of those decisions that used to be manual, and look for areas of waste and inefficiencies that can just disappear.
Yeah. The one thing I was going to add is, it's not exactly the change management process, but really is just, QA automation, right? Doing proper testing, making sure that change management has a relationship with you, with that process, right? That trust process that, we've have, adequate testing in our regression testing or smoke testing or integration testing, right? Because all of those things lead up into, making change management a lot easier. Cool.
Well, all right. So how has this transformation impacted, or how do you deal with the organizational structure? Because it sounds like we're doing things differently. We probably need to organize ourselves differently.
I mean, Conway's rule, it said that your architecture, your systems will end up mimicking your organizational structure. And so if nothing else, you should at least be aware of Conway's rule and understand why you have arrived at the system that you have. Is it because a long time ago somebody said somebody divided the teams up in a certain way, in which case your system completely matched that, and then take a step back and say, does that still make sense organizationally? But then also the more end to end you can think, the more shifting left you can think, and don't just constrain yourselves to the dev teams. The entire, from ideation and on the business, you want to include the business. We took great pains to bring the business into our Scrum teams and giving them, basically they had a stake in the game. Before the feature would move to stage, they would have a stake in the game, and we did a lot of things to shift even further left than we had been, bringing in ideation, bringing in the features, making sure everybody saw that as the features were coming on board, giving the business team a seat at the table. So the dev teams weren't just a black hole and completely separated from the business teams. But then as the functionality moves all the way out to production and beyond, you want to just have that clear view and then looking for waste and inefficiencies in each step.
Cool.
So I would say one separate thing and similar kind of relative to organization that we kind of picked up on and ran with is we branded our team as the DevOps enablement team. We're not like, I think some organizations think in order to get DevOps, I need a DevOps team. And that's really kind of counterintuitive because principles of DevOps are integrating those just culturally across the organization. If you say one team is your DevOps team, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. You're not really getting the messaging. What we decided to do was brand a DevOps enablement team. And our job is to evangelize the value of DevOps, help along that journey, help building pipelines, help with agile code management, help with agile practices in general, help with standards, security standards. Really where we kind of come in as a team is to act as kind of a bridge for some of those different areas. There's multiple developers that are developing React across different program teams that might not be talking to each other. Let's make sure they're working on a common standard together. There's multiple teams that are needing security code scanning. Let's make sure they're all adhering to the same code scanning process. So really, when we talk about the team structure and organization, it's trying to build that center of excellence for DevOps and make sure that that's funneling out to the organization as opposed to everybody running in their own direction, doing it themselves, or saying one team is doing all of the work that is the DevOps team, because that doesn't work either. So,
yeah. One other thing to add to Sean's point, right? Since we do this together is really, exactly what he said, right? Is, I know in a lot of organization, they don't have a team called a DevOps team, right? Because it's just a practice, right? It's you have a team, a full stack team that is capable of building code, deploying code, and also practicing DevOps. And it really is that DevOps enablement focus where we learn all of these processes, understand them, and then we move them back left, right, to the teams and make sure that we train them, mentor them on what DevOps is. So this way they're able to deliver their product or whatever they're working on in a more structural or best practices manner.
And I would just add, at Optum, and I'm sure many big companies, I'm noticing a much higher focus on innovation, on innovation and practicing agile at scale. We're maturing our engineering practices across the board, promoting reuse, open source, inner source, lots of communications along those lines. We have lots of hackathons. We're looking for great ideas, and hackathons, maybe one a month that you can enter and provide it and try it out. And really, it's all about, additionally, just with the constant focus on simplification and automation. And it really is
the success of inner source like Ted just mentioned. So whatever your team's doing, you can't learn absolutely everything. So my team helps people bring together a lot of different capabilities, whether it's a deployment capability or testing capability, but we can't learn every single platform we have in-house. So what we've done instead is we've run an inner source model for all of these capabilities. So we hook their existing capabilities into our orchestration engine. So that way we can have the experts actually building out that integrations with us. And then we can connect the delivery teams directly to the platform owners for any direct support. So that way our team isn't the one-stop shop for everything, because there's only 7 of us. We can't do it. So inner source has been a huge change for us.
Yeah, and it's a great organizational way to address the promotion of the culture. Let me just touch on the big bad scary wolf, which is governance, compliance, and security. That's always thrown up as the big stop sign. Thou shalt not pass because governance, compliance, security. How have you addressed that from a problem point of view?
So we treat it like the rest of our CI. So your security scans, a security problem, is just like we would treat, code quality or any other functional requirement. So we bring it into that decision. Do we continue to promote? So we automate as much of the security scanning as we can for applications. And then we give that feedback to the developers right alongside everything else. Hey, it looks like you have a null pointer risk here. Hey, by the way, that's an OAuth top 10. Don't do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. What we do is definitely the same thing, right? In our CI process, we've partnered with Veracode and some other companies out there to try to shift security as left as possible. Right, as much left as possible, and really just look at things like software composition analysis. Right, let the developer be aware of components that he's including inside of the process, because one of the problems is that we don't want to scare them off. Right, you don't want to build a process where you have some strict security guidelines in there and you start scaring people off, because they're going to find ways to try to bypass it. Right, and so just really making sure that you work with them, let them understand it. Socialize it with them, take phase approach. Don't be too serious about it. I mean, it is a serious thing, right? But also work with them for them to understand it, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, you don't want to scare them off, because they'll find ways to bypass it.
Cool. Right. And now just double down. Just we have the same language to shift left. We, in the past, during our month of hardening, we would fix security problems, but the problem was any available developer would go through and fix them all. Now we decided that is a friction point, and it could be the same guy is making all the security issues, and he doesn't understand about the null pointer. And so we put a huge focus on notifying the developer, doing scans early, shifting it left, and requiring that the developer who generated the issue is the one who is fixing and learning from it. And also the other thing we did is we added it to our quality gate. So if it's a critical or high, we don't allow it to pass the quality gate, and the developers are incentive, and they can't, they're incentive to fix it. And the false positives, of course, are the one annoying thing in this whole thing, and we're looking at, and we have ideas there as well, how to reduce that friction of a false positive. And we have some good progress there.
Awesome. Let's spend just a couple minutes on just like 30 seconds. Coolest result that you've seen on this journey for your company.
I can go first. So we've had a proprietary software that we had a challenge with, where the challenge was, deployments, testing, development teams, right? They're all working together, and one code change usually take them 5+ days to commit, right? And so one of the examples there is that we were able to revisit their infrastructure, clean that up, add a CI/CD pipeline in there, and put in automated testing, right? And so we were able to go from 5 days to about an hour, right? And that was one of the huge success for us.
For us, our first, we went from one of our portals went from delivering 5 times a year to 2-week to delivery, and with almost no defects. I mean, they really, that portal was able to hit on all cylinders, embrace everything that we had all come together to learn as a culture, and they did it. They did it just through. It was such a natural occurrence that it happened, that going from 5 deliveries a year to every 2 weeks was such an eye-opening experience that the other teams have yet to match that level of success, but they've provided a path for us to follow. So, and that's the outcome of it. The way they did it was really just by embracing the concept of shift left, code ownership, and quality gates.
I've got one more too. We have one of our platforms that's has to go through yearly compliance audits. and went through one just recently in a cycle. And because we had everything built as infrastructure as code, because we had everything in scripts and run books in the pipeline process, it was really easy to dump out all the attestation documentation in that as one big codified thing and say, here you go. Happy to talk through any of these components if you don't understand what they do. But I can show you step one from what the base image of the system looks like. I can show you what one of those looks like. And then I can show you through step 100 when it's all done, what the thing should look like. And if anybody tampers with it, we destroy it and recreate it. And all the things that we've built into the nuts and bolts to the point where, I mean, past audits in previous organizations, I've sat down and it takes sometimes, a day or two just to go through a full attestation of a system. It was a 5-minute call of, you've already reviewed all the stuff I've given you. There are no questions. Good. Couple basic questions and I'm out the door. So back to the governance and compliance piece, it actually made that whole process a lot easier because I don't have to arbitrarily go pull system values and, instrumentation out of the system. I can really quickly just say, here's how it's built. If you have questions, let me know. So.
For us, it was that decoupling of the business process of your CI/CD, so deciding if we should deploy and then where to deploy to, from the actual tech stacks. So being able to show somebody, hey, look, your process is going to have overall the same steps, whether you're doing cloud native Java or if you're going out to virtual machines, and we're getting ready even to bring COBOL and the mainframe into that business process. So showing everybody, look, the ideas are the same. You can do this. It doesn't matter what your tech stack. That was the huge change for me. Just being able to show that to the teams. It's better. You don't have to have the best to make your life easier.
Awesome. Well, this is great. From a Platora standpoint, I'm going to jump back through and I'll come back. Just a little commercial from Platora. Why are we here? We're not a deployment automation tool. We're not a infrastructure automation tool. We're a tool to help you in this journey of transformation. We provide visibility and transparency in the process itself by interconnecting the tools and then enabling the natural collaboration and efficiency discoveries that are there as part of the process. I know everyone has heard, Gary Groover's got a great book. We have it on our site. You can come get it. It's fantastic as part of that journey. Mark Hornbeek has a book on DevOps transformation, and we have that also available for free on our site. Come to the Platora site, and you can get those resources. I want to thank everyone, and first just say any final thoughts for teams that are going on this journey.
I would just kind of reiterate what I think I've been saying is you want to avoid top-down tooling, top-down mandate to teams. It's important to create development standards, to create security guardrails, and to tell the teams how they're going to be measured and what metrics are going to be used. But you don't want to require the individual teams to follow a management mandate. They need to feel the ownership, and that's the way they'll remain creative. And the other thing is, and I heard it, is enabling the team. You want to create a technology DevOps enablement team that is a one-stop shop for people to come together. And I found that if you enable collaboration within your company, teams will take advantage of it. They'll seek each other out. They'll work with each other. Mm-hmm. But it won't naturally happen. And generally, teams will stick together. They could be working on the same floor, but they don't know what each other's doing. And so that's what management can do, is to create an enablement team that provides sort of a one spot location for teams to get together to share successes and chat with each other. And so that's what I would take.
Yeah, I agree on that concept for sure. And that's exactly what we did, right? We created an enablement team because you're going to be in an organization where you're going to have a lot of people that knows this stuff, right? Knows how to do it. But the only thing that's missing is they don't know the process, right? And just really just collaborate and socialize in, right, the process with them, right? It is, for me, it's one of the focus, right? Is really making sure that they understand the different processes and let them own it, right? Don't, like Ted said, right? You don't want to mandate people or scare them off or make them nervous, right? But just really just add to what they already know and just introduce them to the different processes within, the DevOps field.
And not everybody who has a good idea is going to be on your enablement team. So we started a software engineering community of practice. So we created a space where anybody from any team can come and share their success and get it out to the rest of the organization.
And just one last thought from me. I mean, I would say everything we said is super important, and making sure to grassroots a little bit of it, right? If you have people inside these teams, kind of like what Ben was talking about, if there's people in these other teams that have an idea of CI/CD or have an idea how to do some of these things, let them experiment, pull those ideas out of them. They're going to know how their platforms are best enabled by CI/CD automation or other DevOps practices. They're going to be the ones who have the ideas to integrate. Really, from a centralized team's perspective, it's more around how do I make sure that fits within the framework, the construct, the general standard of how we do CI/CD and DevOps as an organization, and making sure that fits the model.
Very cool. I wanted to thank you again, for being here. And I've really enjoyed this session. I'm sure you have as well. It's really fun getting in a room with a group of really smart people that not only have intelligence, but the wisdom of the bumps and bruises and the successes along the way, and sharing some of those insights. I really appreciate it. Reach out to folks on, if you have questions for anybody on our panel, you can reach out online, LinkedIn. But thank you so much for everyone for being here and sharing your thoughts. This has really been cool.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you, Jeff.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
All right. Next, we're going to turn things over to our Chief Content Officer, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has the news around the MediaOps headlines, a webinar preview for next week, and an interview with the VP of Digital Assurance and Quality Engineering at Capgemini. Charlene, take it away.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. It's Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Tuesday edition of the news headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article on the practice of code signing in DevSecOps. One of the reasons why organizations have trouble making the jump from DevSecOps to DevSecOps, I should say, is the security of the code, especially when code is being pulled from repos. Especially for open source code where you have so many people, or not enough, contributing to it. But depending on the complexity of their pipelines, a lot of DevOps teams may issue digital certificates that are signed by an untrusted source and stored insecurely to speed their builds. That can lead to insecure code being released, which can have serious consequences. This article takes a look at the hardened code signing and how to streamline its management in DevOps and DevSecOps pipelines. We also have an article from Bill Dorfeld, who takes a big picture look at application development. Currently, he argues, the best app dev tools are available only to the biggest companies that can afford them. Think Microsoft, Google, and the like. But the other 99% of companies are often left to their own devices with tools that may or may not address their requirements. In a way, this is good, he said. It has given rise to a greater level of creative problem solving, but it also puts a larger burden on developers. That said, he doesn't see vendors changing their models anytime soon to level the playing field. So to fill the gap, he said, a new generation of tools that require IT and businesses to work more effectively and closer together to build applications that are effective in both technology and in cost. That includes more widespread use of AI and, increasingly, low-code tools to accommodate the so-called citizen developers. In other words, a technology to promote the democratization of IT. In the news, IBM announced it is acquiring Instana, which provides an application performance management platform optimized for microservices. Instana will plug an observability gap that has emerged in IBM's portfolio as organizations start to build and deploy cloud-native applications more broadly. IBM plans to primarily focus on the Instana technology on microservices-based applications, but it can also be used to observe existing legacy applications. So that's an option that IBM is mulling for the future. This is the latest in an ongoing observability conversation in the DevOps space. Observability goes beyond monitoring, as it can focus on interactions that cover unknown relationships and dependencies between applications and infrastructure. Over on Container Journal, we have an article that looks at 4 security risks that delay container and Kubernetes application development and deployment. Security breaches in Kubernetes environments is becoming a real issue. 90% of respondents to a survey from StackRox reported they had a security breach in their Kubernetes environment in the last year. It's critical that organizations include security in both the development and building phase to adequately address all potential challenges and avoid potential security headaches. This article discusses the 4 most common threats and how companies can avoid them. On Security Boulevard, Richie Jennings takes a look at a series of reports that Chinese hacking group APT10, which also goes by a slew of other names, including Stone Panda and Cloudhopper, has been busy targeting Japanese organizations for at least a year. Espionage seems to be the reason, and attacks aren't limited to Japan but have occurred in the US, the UK, India, and Germany. The attacks have been on Japanese companies in the automotive, pharmaceutical, engineering, and managed services provider industries. The group is focused on the theft of information, including corporate records, HR documents, meeting memos, and expense information, among other things. And as COVID-19 rates are once again spiking, we have an article that discusses how organizations need to revisit their security efforts around remote work. We're 8 months or so into this pandemic, so you'd think companies would have a better handle on their work-from-home security for their employees and their data. But a lot of companies are still working on cleaning up the result of mistakes they made the first time around, and they're generally playing catch-up with their security. So this article looks at all the steps that employees should be doing to keep themselves and their company's data safe as we continue to work remotely. Much of this will sound familiar, so this article may simply be a refresher for some. But for others, this article could act as a playbook to instilling security best practices among employees. All right, that's it for news headlines for today. Here in the States, we will be celebrating Thanksgiving later this week, so I'll be back next week with more headlines. Until then, relax and have a happy Thanksgiving.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Satish Natarajan, who is the VP of Digital Assurance and Quality Engineering at Capgemini. Satish, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene, for hosting.
All right, great. So want to talk to you a little bit about the latest edition of the World Quality Report, which I know is this is the 12th edition, am I right?
Yep.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the World Quality Report. What is it that you guys set out to do with it, and what does it measure?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is the 12th edition of the report. We've been doing it since 2008. This is the only report in the industry today that goes into the depth and breadth of QA. To discuss what's happening in QA, what's trending, what are the challenges. And we also provide recommendations or very specific call to action for people to take into consideration as they build their strategy for next year. And it's a pretty detailed report, about 75 pages it runs. That's the depth of the report. So this year, we surveyed and interviewed about 1,750 people. About 25% of that is CIOs. The rest range from IT directors and VPs to product managers and CMOs, etc. We covered about 32 countries in this report and about 10 different sectors, including banking and financial services, retail, manufacturing, telecom, media and technology, and public sector, etc. So this year, we actually focused on 6 different themes as a part of the report. The first is what's happening to testing in the agile and DevOps world, right? So that's number one. And number 2 is from an automation standpoint in testing, where is the industry today and where it's going. Third, a very interesting chapter is around artificial intelligence and machine learning. Right? So how is AI and machine learning plays into the QA strategy? That was the third topic. Fourth was around test data management and test environment management. That was the fourth topic. Fifth was around budgets. How is the QA budgets getting impacted? That's fifth topic. And last but not the least, it's a special chapter. We want to understand more about the impact of COVID on QA. Has it changed things a bit? Has the focus changed? How organizations are adapting to it to meet their quality goals. So those are 6 topics that we focused on. It's a pretty interesting report, I should say.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it's pretty comprehensive too. So this being the 12th edition, what were some of the key takeaways that you guys found from this report? Maybe, and taking a look at maybe last year's report. What's changed and what really stood out for you?
Right. Charlene, if I take you on a fast lane for the last 10 years, so if I compare the first report to this year report, which we just launched 2 weeks back, fundamentally there are 5 things that stood out for me. The first one is the objective of testing itself. So back then, the objective of the testing is to actually find defects, which is still a very important objective. But the strategic focus of testing has moved past beyond just finding defects to contributing to business outcomes, right? And to ensure brand protection and ensure customer experience, and really driving the business outcomes for the organization. So that was number one. And number 2, from an automation standpoint, 10 years back, if you read our first report, the definition of automation testing is primarily regression automation, right? So that's basically what automation meant back then. But now the connotation has completely changed, right? So we're talking about the entire life cycle automation all the way through, not just regression, but automating your test design process, to automating your bill management process, to automating your entire life cycle, from a functional standpoint, all the way through monitoring the quality in production and doing sentiment analysis and bringing that feedback loop back into requirements, right? So that's the second biggest sort of shift from 10 years ago to now. The third is around the skill set of a tester. So back then, if you bring a good blend of domain and testing skills together, if you act as a liaison between IT and business, you're a golden tester, right? But now the skill set of a tester, has to bring a mix of technology, data, testing, and domain skills together. It's extremely complex now, but that's where you add the right value back to the business. And the fourth, is around data and environments. Right? So in our first report, test data management and test environments stood out as the most challenging piece for QA. Right? There's good news and bad news in that. The good news is the technology has evolved. There is more sophisticated tools and technology out there for you to handle your data, for you to take your environments to cloud and be more smart about it. But the bad news, though, is it's still the biggest challenge, for the industry today. Right? So that's the fourth, sort of striking, difference between 2008 and today. The last one is more around budgets. Right? So back in the day, the budgets for QA was significant. About 30% of the project budget was spent on QA, but now it's come down to about 22% this year, right, on the budgets for QA. Which in my opinion is still significant. I see tremendous opportunities to still cut the budgets for QA down. If you look at the 22%, roughly about 25% of that is actually spent on people, on comp and ben. About 30% is actually spent on tool, the software licenses. Still about 41% is actually spent on environments, right? So that tells me that the cloudification of environments for dev and test, there's still a long way to go. So that's the quick summary, Sean.
Yeah, it sounds like there's just so much information in this report. But one of the things that I was thinking about, since obviously this 2020 is just such a strange year all the way around. So it's kind of thrown, I would imagine, like the curve right off the chart, if you will. And it's really difficult to measure things this year based on years previous because everything has changed. But how has that actually impacted the results of this year's report? Did you guys notice anything that was just really skewed this year, or just dramatically different based on maybe the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that everybody's working from home, and IT is and if in many organizations just not operating under the same model that it traditionally has been.
Right. So definitely, I think COVID has had an impact. Some of it is actually, I would say, good impact. For testing. There are three things that stood out for me. The first is the whole notion of distributed agile model. I think it's operating at its peak today, right? So I don't think we would ever see any better model, for a distributed agile in action. It doesn't matter whether the developers and testers are based in Berlin or Boston or Bangalore. There is no more expectations of co-location. People working in different places, from their homes, but things are working, right? So that was number one, but the key to success, though, is the right leverage of digital collaboration tools, like Teams, for example, right? So you got to have those collaboration tools in place, right? So for you to communicate more effectively, be more real time, and to deliver the results, in this model, right? So, and the second thing that's very important in this distributed agile model is having the right dashboarding capability in place. The dashboarding has to be not just static dashboards that provides you a report on a daily basis, but has to be a lot more intelligent dashboards that allows you to make decisions real time, right? So that's the second aspect of the distributed agile model. And the other thing that we saw change significantly is around the focus of QA itself, in terms of what you test, right? So there is a significant increase all of a sudden, in terms of what you're testing, more around testing for user experience, because everybody's online. Not many people are going into a retail store to buy things, right? So you're online, shopping for clothing, shopping for your groceries. The user experience aspect of it is a lot more significant. In fact, it's more for survival, than a nice to have, right? So, so from that perspective, the focus for QA to, on user experience testing has become extremely important, and the focus on security testing, is significantly gone up as well, right? So, if you look at the report, from a security perspective, about more than 50% of the CIOs said security is actually the biggest concern today, right? So the focus on security testing is important. Performance testing as well. We saw a good momentum on performance testing because there's a lot more people online today on your digital properties. So, you got to test for performance to make sure, the responsiveness of those websites or your apps is as good, can handle the volume. Last but not the least is also, which I see it as a concern today, that the industry is not focusing as much as it should, is around accessibility testing, right? So, if you look at those people with disabilities and, people who walked into a store to buy things, they are forced to do everything online today, right? So, so from that perspective, your application, or your website, or your app on the iPhones or Androids have to be absolutely inclusive, so that requires a real focus on accessibility testing to be done. There are some, regulations around it. There are some WCAG standards and Section 5 compliance. those things that you have to test for in today's world, right? So I think those are the big changes, Charlene, from a COVID perspective. I really hope a lot of this would stay. Hopefully the vaccine would come soon, and we all get back to normal lives. Can't wait for it. But even as we get back to the new normal, some of these learnings and best practices should continue.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot more about building in accessibility features in application development since the beginning of the pandemic. And that is absolutely something that I hope sticks around even post-pandemic, because I don't think that there's been enough enough credence given to the fact that, we have an entire population of people who just can't use online services the way that able-bodied people are able to do on a regular basis. So real quick, before we wrap things up, what are some of the, maybe some of the best practices or some of the tips and tricks, if you will, that we can take away from this year's report findings?
So first is definitely around the responsibility of quality. It just doesn't. It's not just the role of a tester. It's a mindset that the entire organization, must adopt. Mm-hmm. So every constituent in a software development life cycle has to own quality. Right? So that's number one. And number two is in terms of the operating model for testing. It's moved from being an independent function to an integrated function to now it's becoming more of an inclusive function, right? So where, the testers are more enabling for quality versus the organization, right? So from that perspective, having the right mindset, going through the change management that I'm not just responsible for writing requirements, or I'm not responsible just for writing code, right? But I'm responsible for quality. I'm responsible for the experience of my application. Right, so that mindset has to change, right? So that's number one, Charlene. So number two is more around the automation leverage, right? So you really got to move past focusing on functional automation, regression automation. There is significant advancements that has happened today, for you to really automate and bring holistic value across the life chain, right? So for example. There are tools and techniques out there where you can automate your test design process, right? The writing of the test case itself can be automated today. Oftentimes people don't realize you're actually spending roughly about 24% of your time in actually writing test cases. So that actually can be automated today, right? Yeah. And you can automate your environment build out of test environments. You can automate your test data provisioning process. You can automate monitoring of quality and doing the sentiment analysis in production, right? So there is more holistic full lifecycle automation that you can achieve today. So that's the second thing. And the third recommendation I would provide is more around the leverage of artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? It's no more a tool or a technology for developers, right? So there are some really mature use cases that the QA organizations can take advantage of. Today AI can help you to optimize your testing. It can help you to accelerate your automation, make your automation scripts more self-healing, so you're not spending a lot of time maintaining those scripts, right? And AI can actually help you to predict the application quality before it goes to production, right? So there are some really good algorithms and use cases that you can take advantage of and become more smarter in the process. And fourth is around test environments. Right. So as I mentioned, still you're spending about 41% of your testing budgets on environments. Yeah. That tells me that there's a lot more leverage of cloud that you can take in test environments today than what you've done in the past. It's not just a cost play, but it significantly impacts your time to market. If you look at a DevOps journey an organization is taking, you really cannot automate everything and stop manually to build your environments. It's a need to have automation in place to be able to truly achieve the mission of continuous testing and DevOps. Right. So that's the fourth recommendation. The fifth one is around the skill set. So really focus on building the right skill set into your team. Not just a technology skill set, not just a domain skill set. you need people with data science background in your QA teams. You need people with multiple skill set, in terms of development skill set, the data skill set, the testing skill set to bring the right process and methodologies in place, and as well as the business and domain skill set, right? So if you marry and blend all of these things together, that's when you can truly make an impact. So that would be my top recommendation, Charlene. Yeah.
And those are really great. I really think that organizations who take these to heart, I really expect that they'll not only survive but thrive in the next year. So, Satish, thank you so much for great insight on everything, and love to hear more about the World Quality Report. So please do stay in touch with us regarding that.
Oh, we will. And people can just go to worldqualityreport.com and download. It's a pretty comprehensive report. I would highly encourage you to read the report. We have country-specific chapters in that. So, the 32 countries we've covered. So if you want to know the nuances of what's happening in North America versus France versus Japan, you've got those insights. Or, if you want to know more about what's happening in a particular sector, what's happening in banking versus what's happening in retail. There are some very interesting nuances you would find in those chapters as well. So,
excellent. So if you have just a little bit of extra reading time, you can really get a lot out of it. So that's great. That's great. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. As I said before, appreciate your time, appreciate your expertise. So thanks for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, bye.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Webinars Preview. This week, we actually do not have any webinars on tap for you guys because of the Thanksgiving week, but we do have a slew starting up again next week. So thought I'd give you a preview of a couple of them so you can mark your calendar. The first one is happening Tuesday, December 1st at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's called Leveraging Value Streams for Planning in SAFe and Beyond. It's sponsored by Plutora. This webinar takes a look at how value stream management superpowers SAFe implementations, and SAFe being capital S, capital A, capital F, and lowercase e. Takeaways include optimizing agile release trains, value streams and teams with value stream management, aligning and measuring OKRs and KPIs in real time with data from a DevOps tool chain, and how value stream management can help organizations move from managing dependencies to breaking them. The next webinar is called Hotels, Hookups, and Video Conferencing, a top 10 countdown to 2020's worst data breaches. This one is also happening Tuesday, December 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. Sponsored by Sunray Security. So in this webinar, Eric Kadrowski, who is the CISO and Director of Cloud Research at Sunray Security, will dissect the top 10 notorious cloud data breaches from 2020, breaking down how each was caused and how they could have been prevented. He'll also detail the anatomy of each type of data breach and what we can learn and what allowed the data breach to happen, as well as the preventative measures that people can take. All right, the last webinar I want to let you know about today is called DevSecOps, Best Practices for Enterprises. This one is happening Wednesday, December 2nd at 11 a.m. on Security Boulevard and DevOps.com. It's sponsored by WhiteSource. This webinar features Cherie Ipson of WhiteSource and Brian Dawson of CloudBees, and they'll be discussing DevSecOps in all its forms, including why traditional DevOps has shifted and what this means, who should own security in the age of DevOps, and some best practices to integrate continuous security across the DevOps framework. Interesting stuff, especially if your organization is struggling with your DevSecOps journey. All right, that's all that I have for this edition of the webinars preview. Please check back on, I'll be back live on Tuesday, next Tuesday, but we will be doing a couple shows here and there in between. But want everybody to enjoy yourself. If you are celebrating Thanksgiving, please enjoy yourself. Otherwise, everybody else, please, well, still enjoy yourself, but stay safe.
Next up is our Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell's guest today is the CEO of Movo. And they're going to be discussing digital payments and how COVID's affected that.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined today by Eric Solis, who is CEO of Movo Cash. Welcome. Good to be talking with you, Eric.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Love to hear a little bit about yourself, and of course, tell us about Movo. Tell us about what you guys do.
So I'm a longtime fintech entrepreneur. As a matter of fact, I like to say that I was in fintech before we even knew what to call it. I'm glad they came up with a sort of short abbreviated way to describe this area of expertise. But so I did my first startup in 1998, 99, kind of giving away my age there. And then that technology was sort of a micro investing technology. And then recognizing sort of the automation of the internet, I did it again in 2005. It was a set it and forget it micro investing technology where you could sort of say 252 days of the year, every day that the banks are open, I want to put $15.87 away. And then that would go into an IRA. So you wouldn't be trying to figure out how to write a check for $4,000 at the end of the year. And so then didn't really feel like doing another startup, but I got called by a couple of CEOs of some fairly large organizations that had big populations of people, and they were in two different, segments of fintech, but I noticed that they had the same problem. At the end of the day, they were struggling with moving money efficiently, quickly. And I thought that some of my micro investing technology, passed straight through processing systems could work to make an interesting fintech solution where payments were concerned. And so lo and behold, I filed for a patent in December of 2013. We got that patent in November of 2018. And here Movo Cash is all this time later. We've issued over 2.5 million shares using our technology. And, we think that we're onto something. We've got a lot of proof points and we've got more to prove, but nonetheless, I think we're on the right track.
Well, thank you for that. Let's kind of set the stage then, because I'm really curious about your thoughts of what's happening in our, in our world, in our society that you're building Movo from. So, digital transactions, digital payments are not something new. I think it was mentioned to you. I worked on the Thrift network back in the 80s, the early ATM networks. But on the other hand, the way we use those have changed drastically. I mean, you've got Venmo and all kinds of variations of that, from mobile devices for payment systems, and PayPal. It's been around forever. But you think about what to me has really changed recently in the COVID era is you go to any kind of a restaurant or some place where you're going to make a payment. They don't take cash. They don't take coins. It's all digital payment, which just as a side caused me to ask, what about the people that don't have that capability? But that's got to be a pretty substantial change, a disruptive change in the market for you. Do you see it that way?
I do. And at the same time, I think it's really interesting to stop and reflect on a plastic card. You think about their first plastic card was, I think, a Diners Club card in the 1950s. And then in the 70s, they took it off cardboard, put it on plastic, put a mag stripe on the back. And if you think about it, not much has changed since then.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, so now we have an EMV chip. And so that's become sort of like the digitization of it. And to the point you make, you walk into that restaurant, they're expecting you to have a card. And so digital money, in the context of really eliminating the form factor of what that 1970 innovation produced, is still the go-to most popular transaction form factor in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, I got to be careful because I just said Google. And if I say that again, Mesh will go crazy and start answering every question that you're asking.
Well, may be helpful if I
have to be careful when I say that word.
Yes.
All right. But in any case, they have created a way for us now to essentially tie a payment card to a form factor that is in fact digital.
Mm-hmm.
Tap and pay, using your phone, using these types of pay services, is transforming and is finally sort of eliminating, or at least reducing, the importance of plastic. And so I think that there is a huge gargantuan leap in next generation cashless momentum that we're seeing, and it's been really sparked by COVID. I mean, in other words, that's taken it, put it on steroids, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But again, just quickly, the point being that since 1970, we've had the slowest dying technology, on planet Earth is that doggone mag stripe. The EMV chip is finally transforming that, but it still is on that same card. So it's really remarkable just to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I got my first credit card in the 70s, in the mag stripe.
Yeah.
The Apple Pay is the one I'm most familiar with, as I'm not a payment systems expert by any stretch of the imagination. But I think one of the notable things about it, at least visual to customers, is there's no account number on the card, right? It's just a piece of metal, actually, and it's all really digital with digital certificates and handling that transaction in a different, secure way, which hopefully helps with fraud and theft and things like that. But I would imagine there's more to it than that those kind of payment systems have changed over the way we're used to doing payments.
It's interesting, and I think you're touching on an important conversation without even knowing it, and it's that there's still Apple Pay, the pays know this, that there's still a fair amount of risk in the transference of the information from a mobile device to the point of sale, which is the device that's at the merchant.
Mm-hmm.
And you still need to transfer the information from your secure element in your phone to that POS system. And there is a risk there that there could be some sort of like capturing of your PAN, your primary account number, in that transfer. One of the things that we focus a lot on is creating a layered approach where Apple Pay empowers the merchant to create a token that they receive from the issuing bank. That's what's happening behind the curtains, right? What we do is to empower the consumer to create a token, right? So now you have, for example, we can create, an iTunes token, right? So, or let me use an in-store solution. Let's say a Target token, okay? And then Target has Apple Pay. So now I have a consumer-facing token, which is essentially a 16-digit card number that is used only for Target, by way of example. And then On the other side of that, Target has got its own token through Apple Pay. So they call that a layered fraud approach, because now the fraudster has to figure out how to crack two codes simultaneously, and it's happening, in milliseconds. And so that is really, in our mind's eye, that's kind of like the, if you don't mind me saying, it's a perfect solution to a very complicated problem. So we think a lot about how to empower the consumer with the same kind of technology that the merchant and the banks and issuing banks have access to. How do we pull that into, as something as seamless as a mobile device, and convert that into, the card issuing bank, so to speak, that generates those tokens for unique merchants.
Let me ask then, so a MOVO approach would be something more akin to, rather than having to have Apple Pay on each end, to be super simplistic about it, on the client device and on the receiver through near field or however it's communicating, is you're taking an approach of, we can do similar, kind of the same thing, but it doesn't have to be Apple Pay on this end, or it doesn't have to be Apple Pay on the other end. It can be a token-based system that you can interface with, regardless of what that is. Am I understanding this correctly? Or am I way off and left?
No, it's a really great question. And I think you're asking the question exactly like a consumer would ask it. So it's excellent. But it's really, so we're not necessarily stepping into the NFC world. Apple controls, for example, the secure element, which is a chip in your phone. Then that's the beauty of Apple. They're able to use that secure element to create the NFC interaction with the POS system. So we don't get involved there. Where we get involved is that you realize that you've got this digital wallet with all of your Apple Pay cards. So you provision your card to Apple Pay. And let's say it's your American Express card or your, Bank of America debit card or whatever, and you provision it. So what happens there is that that's tokenized in Apple Pay. Essentially, behind the scenes, as I said a moment ago, the merchant's getting the token. What we are saying is don't use your American Express, don't use your Bank of America debit card, don't even put them in that digital wallet. Create an individual card for Walmart, for Target.
Okay.
And then you've got those wallets in the digital wallet of Apple Pay, okay? And now when you select it for payment, you get to control exactly how much money you put on there. You get to control who has access to it, when and how much. And it shields your primary account numbers. Mm-hmm. And it sort of like treats your primary account numbers as kind of like the master bank identification number that you're able to spin these other cards off of. Follow me? So it's kind of like you open your safe, you put those cards in, you don't take them out, because they have full access to your balance, your full balance in your bank account, the full balance of your credit. And then in today's world, to continue to use the same 16-digit card number over and over and over again, we all know the risks and the problems that come with that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot. I get what you're saying now. That makes a lot of sense. That's the abstraction between your bank information and the merchant. So it almost seems like, tell me if this is pushing it too far this direction. It could be a virtual card, if you will, for Walmart. It could be a virtual card per transaction. So talk about making it even more difficult to, now every transaction is unique. There is no.
No, you're spot on. That's
okay.
Exactly it.
All right.
You got it.
Seems like where that's
the idea of the virtual card. The thing that a lot of people don't understand is, so the reason that I move away from the concept of virtual, okay, is that there's virtual realities, which mean they're not real. Mm-hmm. There's a connotation to when you call something virtual. And back early on, virtual cards were exactly that. They were not. They weren't, card numbers that had access to 45 million merchants worldwide, like a digital representation of a real card and digital cash does. Mm-hmm. They were limited. You could use them you could use them for a certain time period, a timed out, or you could use it at, Bed Bath and Beyond, or, but it was a virtual card. So that's actually a kind of a bad word in our ecosystem because of the connotation there. These are actual digital cards, complete with that 16-digit card number, CVV, which is the 3-digit number that we use, in every transaction, and an expiration date. And all of that is delivered. And by the way, that's part of our patent, is that the delivery of all of that into a digital form factor that then can be used with Apple Pay and the other pays, right? And that can, be used for mobile, phone purchases or website purchases where you just enter the 16-digit and all the credentials into the website. So it's uniquely different in that it acts exactly like your 16-digit card number in the physical or EMV world. Make sense?
Yep, totally does. So tell me a little bit about then, there's all kinds of business case studies of Firestone and the, Run Forever tire that, they had to go through replacing all the infrastructure to make that work. And of course, that made that a challenging thing to succeed. How do you break into I want to be part of your Android phone, I want to be part of your Apple phone, I want to be able to communicate with the merchants on the other side? What does it take for you to play in the ecosystem?
That's a really great question. I think it's really probably the greatest strength and the magic of Movo is that we have zero merchant acquiring. And we are an enabling technology. We're not a disruptive technology. I don't think we're disruptive at all. As a matter of fact, I think we're the best friends of MasterCard and Visa. They love us because we're actually using more of their product, not less, right? We're an enabling technology because we integrate and are compatible with all the pays, Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and the like. And so we're compatible with all the 45 million existing POS systems globally. We're compatible with fiat currency. We're not a crypto. We're not like so we don't have all those silos and latency built in that you find. I say all the time that Bitcoin catapulted us, light years into the future technologically, but threw us into the dark ages where fungibility of capital and being able to spend it on goods and services are concerned. So we think we found a really nice spot where when you look at us, we look like a debit card or like a prepaid card or like a credit card. But the beauty of it is for us is that, yes, that is exactly what we look like. We don't need you to change your behavior. We don't need to teach you how to do something new like you need to with Bitcoin. It acts just like every other card in your wallet. But what we did was convert it into a digital cash that allows it to move more freely without frictionless movement of money from point A to point B, so it's like we've created more like this. We all know of like credit cards, debit cards. We think of them vertically. I'm a consumer, I use it as at a merchant, right? That's kind of the normal relationship in the flow of a payment card. We created a horizontal plane that produces this way in which I can send you money on the rails, Visa or MasterCard rails. You receive it. In essence, it's a Visa or MasterCard payment. It's a MasterCard payment. And then you can go and redeem it wherever payment cards are accepted, all in one seamless, frictionless environment. It's subtle, but it's powerful. And the speed at which the money moves, the settlement's guaranteed. Typically, all of our deposits are FDIC insured. The guarantee of payment, in terms of settlement for both the consumer and the merchant is all built in. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. That said, we do need standards. We do need operating rules to be really thought through differently than the way that they've been thought through where payment card industry standards are concerned.
Okay, good. It definitely sounds you've really worked hard on the kind of barriers to entry and trying to remove as much. So let's back up a moment and then kind of go back to where we started our conversation. So the landscape is changing. People are forced to being comfortable with doing more and more cashless digital transactions. How do you see the world changing over the next 12 months? And I'm assuming, COVID's not going away tomorrow and vaccines really won't be prevalent. And it's not the vaccines that matter, it's the vaccinated that matter, right? So we're living in this for a while. The next couple of years, at least, I think. What does the landscape look like from a payment system standpoint?
Well, my crystal ball stopped working a long time ago, but that said, I do believe very much so that this pandemic, COVID-19, whether you think it's hogwash or the most dangerous thing that we've ever experienced on planet Earth doesn't really matter. The bottom line is it's changed us.
Mm-hmm.
It has altered our the whole psychology of the way that we sort of see the world, and I think that it is absolutely important as it relates to the cashless society aspect of the conversation to realize that, when you think about the life cycle of a dollar bill, a $5 bill, a $10 bill, a $20 bill, their life cycle can last anywhere from, let's say 4.5, 5 years to, in the case of a $100 bill, it can be around for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Think about where that dollar goes. Think about the places that it sees. Think about how filthy it is. And and I'm not saying that just to be, there's no hyperbole here. It is absolutely disgusting. It really is. And people didn't think too much about it. But, if you stop and consider the germs that are transmitted through money, I don't know of too many things that could carry more ugly germs and viruses than the currency in which we've used for, hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. So the idea that, COVID has got us thinking like that, digital is not going away. It is not. It is I think that COVID is a 10.0 on the Richter scale where digital banking is concerned. And
it's an accelerant, right? Yeah.
It's going to accelerate it and lock it in. In other words, it's cemented into the future of payments and digital means by which we interact in commerce.
How do you think we address? I'm kind of asking you the big societal questions here. Just interested in your perspective on it. There's various numbers. I think it was like in 2018 or 17, it was something like 6.5% of population in the U.S. didn't have a bank account. So can't participate, at least through that mechanism, through a digital transaction. Is this rapidly going to help us fill that vacuum? So everybody has to have some way of having a way to do a digital transaction. Are we going to have folks left behind because they can't? And so you end up with this sort of counter black market-ish kind of something that lets people still, spend a currency some way to get goods and services. What happens?
It's a great question. And, if you don't mind, if I just give myself a little, sort of love here,
I assume you wouldn't be here if you weren't going to do some of that.
I'm not a Johnny come lately where, going after the underbanked and financial inclusion is concerned. I'll just tell you, I walked away. I was 33, 34 years old. I was making $1 million a year being a stockbroker, very successful, had a 2.5 acre ranch with horses, thoroughbreds. I walked away from it because I saw a time where we were going to need solutions for the underbanked, for the unbanked, for those that were disenfranchised, not just in our own country, but truly around the world. And so Movo really is, even though we're one of the most powerful financial management systems on planet Earth for jet setters, like they don't want their cards out there in the wild. It really is designed, and the biggest bang for the buck comes for those that are unbanked, underbanked. And I do absolutely have a vision. I've said from day one, I want to see that sheep herder who's got a mobile device. He may not have a toilet, right, to use, but he's got a doggone smartphone, because that's, there are now more smartphones than there are toilets on planet Earth. And so, yes, I think that the digital revolution will force innovation. And one of the things that I do as an innovator is that I continually think about and I'm going to call it the lowest common denominator. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I just mean that that's the person we got to get to. It forces you to squeeze out costs, squeeze out inefficiencies, squeeze out latency, and eliminate silos so that things can move freely. As soon as you eliminate and you have to disintermediate a lot of things along the way to create that. And each one of those points of disintermediation create a lower cost solution, which means that the barrier to entry is reduced. So again, back to the point I made, regulations, and let me just say this, fraud, are the two highest priced elements to a banking solution that would be able to be inclusionary on a global basis. And until we solve the problem, in particular of fraud, where we know who's who, and we can rely on the fact that we know who you are, we do have a problem. And I think that, some of what we're seeing with regard to vaccinations and these kind of ways in which they're, thinking about tattooing these numbers and such, I think it's much more to do with identifying and knowing who you are. Because, and if you don't mind, I'm going to say this quickly, I'll be brief. But, you think about an atomic clock, right? And the points of time in between a second, there's more points of time in a second on an atomic clock than there are people on planet Earth. So if all of us at the exact same time said, on the count of three, everybody get a shot, 1, 2, 3, we'd all probably have a different timestamp, even if we all did it at the same time. Then if you got another one and connected them together, now you have a string of numbers that can easily identify and be absolutely immutable and almost impossible to change. And then we probably know who's who. And I think that there are people working on solutions like that. It's way over my pay grade. But I do think about these things from the standpoint of how it impacts financial services for the masses on a global scale. And until we solve that problem, we're going to be hindered.
It is interesting, and we certainly don't have time to explore into this, but like you, I'm fascinated. Yes, I have opinions about it one way or another, but I'm fascinated with society and, how one population can say, I'm not going to accept whatever you present to me as valid evidence of wearing a mask is going to help prevent anything. And another population saying, how could it be so anything but obvious, right? And both sides both groups feeling equally as informed and strength of opinion. Crazy. And that can happen. Same thing can happen with, don't give me a number, right? And it brings up, reminiscent of other things in history. Or no, that's what you have to have, because you got to be able to eliminate fraud. To do that, you got to eliminate, the question of who you are, so we know that it's a valid transaction. Well, we've kind of run up against our time here, Eric. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I'd love to have you back, and as you make some progress in this and continue to make inroads in the market and kind of give us another view on the picture of where we're headed. Because I, like you, believe that once you sort of open the next, whatever the next Pandora's box is, and there's always a series of them, it's not one, that is the new baseline of what's expected. And, we have a whole society of people growing up now thinking this is how you do transactions, and that they're going to live the rest of their life that way, just as well as, people with some gray hair like myself do. So it's been a lot of fun.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
That'd be awesome. So tell us where folks can learn more about Movo.
Yeah, movo.cash, and you can download the app on iOS and Android. So
awesome. Great. I'm going to check it out. Thank you much for being part of our conversation.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, Mitch.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Thanks, Mitchell. Next up, we have a double dose of Channel Roundup with Mike Vizard. Mike's guests this week are from Cloud Checker and XOps. Two good interviews. Let's turn it over to Mike Vizard.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Travis Rell, who is the Vice President of Product Management for Cloud Checker. We are going to be talking a little bit about what's going on with cloud spending these days. Seems to me, Travis, that before the pandemic, we were all a bunch of drunken sailors. People were just throwing that money up at the cloud and, hey, let's spin up a virtual machine. And if we remember to take it down, that's great. What kind of world do we live in now?
That's an interesting way of putting it, but pretty fair. I would actually say it's still trending that direction, surprisingly. I see people are a bit more cognizant of it, especially during the pandemic times, and they're being asked to be more mindful of their budget overall. But in terms of like the companies we work with, and typically the customers I work with, there's still a very large mandate from either their executive team or their business goals to move or utilize cloud services in some fashion. Pandemic's not really slowing that down, but it is asking people to reflect on, just be mindful of where you spend those dollars.
All right. We hear that mindful word all the time, and yet we are trying to push people up into these digital business transformation projects. Things are accelerating. That almost invariably means more spending up in the cloud, I think.
Oh, yeah.
What is your sense of how that conversation goes now? How do I actually have a responsible conversation about cloud spending and application development?
I think that's a great question, first off. You can answer it a couple ways, depending on who's the person advocating, right? So if you're the service delivery manager or the product guy, right? To me, it's a question of the conversation is framed in a tone of revenue or opportunity and speed the market to get there, right? If I have cloud services that can get me 3 months faster on a particular project, that is a good validation to use that particular service to enter the market quicker. Right, especially in these times when people want to eke as much revenue as they can out of a particular service offering or product offering, right? If there's a new angle they can get to in a much faster way, they're going to take it. If you're a delivery manager, someone, a technology lead, team lead, someone more on the engineering side, software development side, typically I would actually say it's about on-ramp, onboarding, and making people more productive quicker. In traditional sort of software development, when you're being asked to either deploy resources or create VMs for a local environment that you're going to stand up and use for software development, like that takes time, right? And you hire somebody, you're talking 3-6 months before they're productive. Cloud services can actually accelerate that pretty quickly because you can create different images of different software deliverables you're working on at a given time. You can have a bunch of managed services for parts of the application stack that you don't have to go figure out and ask somebody to figure out. That can just be managed for you. So the on-ramp and speed for getting productive people on your team is incredible. That's one of the key differences. I typically see people advocate for it.
Do you think that the conversation is changing as we start to move to these Kubernetes environments and cloud services where things are a little more managed? There's a lot of cloud native, there's a lot of piece parts. So is that changing the way people think about consuming these cloud services where it was just before, how many VMs do you want at what size and for how long?
Yeah, I would say many teams are thinking about Kubernetes, in particular containers. I would actually categorize two ways: containers versus serverless. Kubernetes leading the containers bit with Docker and so forth, or serverless. People are looking at technology implementations, and they're saying if we're going to refactor or replatform or lift and shift or insert whatever thing your project you're working on, can we leverage one of those two things to create less technical debt? To accelerate development, to think about scale when Black Friday hits, right? Things of that nature. Kubernetes, containers, and serverless come up all the time. But actually, even at CloudCheckr, we're a SaaS company. We're built on containers and serverless technologies. Actually, that's actually our primary tech stack. The ability to think about what I call like just-in-time infrastructure is crucial nowadays to the software development and implementation process. Meaning, if you know you're going to do a large marketing or ad push, right? You just know historically you'd have to spin up resources ahead of time and prime a cache and get it ready so that your system doesn't go down. Nowadays, right, you have things like auto scaling groups which can be deployed using containers, right? You have things like serverless deployments of Lambda and otherwise that could be spun up on demand as needed, right? So the foresight of using those technologies can quickly create a better experience for the business, where you don't have to think about how is marketing communicating to the engineering team that they're going to do this big ad push. Oh, we're gonna run a thing during Black Friday. By the way, that means all your web servers are going to go down. Like that, those problems go away as a result of considering these technologies.
Okay, a lot of folks are multi-cloud now. But are they shopping multi-cloud by workload before they actually deploy? Or are they kind of just saying, this workload really lends itself to this particular cloud and that's about the size of the issue? Or are they really starting to think about the cost of a workload on a particular cloud platform versus another and, trading things off here and there?
I would say that typically, companies are sticking to, I should back up. Larger enterprises are thinking about different business units and allowing business units to make a purchase recommendation for a particular cloud vendor. You may have business unit number one that chooses Amazon versus number two that chooses Google Cloud for whatever reason. It fits their needs better, right? So they can choose. I've seen on the multi-cloud space, just for a quick second, I've seen less interest in people actually doing deployed workloads across multiple vendors, meaning you have one product that spans across Amazon, Azure, GCP, or otherwise, is the overhead to manage it is exceptional. What I have seen start to come up a little bit more, not often, a little bit more, is price comparisons. I want to move a workload from Amazon to Azure because Amazon's running a rate, or Azure's running a rate that's a little bit different. I'm going to save, 10 cents on every, minute of usage, whatever it is. That comes up. I think it comes up more as a pipe dream than it does a reality. They're interested in sort of the economies at that scale, but then they choose to ignore the actual work that takes to actually implement that type of migration, especially if that's going to be a common conversation. Maybe every year, do we move the platform to a different environment? Oftentimes, engineering overhead, DevOps overhead, automation tooling needed to do that is second to that conversation, and it's usually what creates the biggest barrier to it. So I see it come up often. Not often's a bit optimistic, but I don't think anybody's in practice actually implementing it.
Is anybody out there kind of looking at the total cost of the cloud and going, hey, maybe we should repatriate these applications back on premise? Because at a certain point, some applications, depending on the nature of the workload, wind up being more expensive in the cloud than they are on premise. So how are people approaching that, or is that too an engineering issue that is just too difficult to deal with?
That's actually fairly common nowadays. And there's big news articles out there about particular companies who've done, like Dropbox has done that and so forth. What I've found is that when the company decides they are intentionally not going to invest in a platform, it's good enough. We're happy with how it is. We don't perceive to do many large iterations. It's going to require significant infrastructure changes or otherwise. They are more than happy to put that on-prem and get the biggest discount humanly possible by CapEx purchase, essentially, of that particular resource. And that's perfectly fine. You don't need cloud for that reason. That's a perfectly acceptable use case to stay on-prem. If it's in the cards that you're looking to change something or iterate on it in some way, that's where the actual difference becomes, right? That's where cloud shines in that sort of change velocity iterative process.
Mm-hmm. Where is the CFO in this conversation these days? Are they kind of watching this? Are they running a meter somewhere? Are they coming up to the IT guy and saying, hey, you're over budget this week, what's up? Or, are they just basically doing what they always did in the past, which was, managing with a blunt instrument and just cutting the budget and say, you go figure it out?
It's good. I have seen that become more incorporated into the project teams. I've even seen it get, one of the things that I'm very interested in that CloudCheckr provides to our customers, and I think it's very in line with this, is let's say you're a development team and you're being told what your budget is, right? And you're managing to it. That's your project does, and it's part of the CFO office has approved that in some capacity, right? And that's what they're measuring to as well. Integrating your development cycle to take into account your forecast has started to become a thing, right? If you're going to make software changes that will most likely result in bigger hardware needs or better, a larger fan out of resources at a given time, being able to sort of holistically forecast, hey, when that occurs, I may trip my budget, and then making a decision as to, is that the right software implementation, or should I get approval on that budget change? That's the type of integration I'm starting to see between the sort of CFO's finance office and the project teams themselves. I would say that companies that are sort of starting to transition to cloud or really starting to get dug in real deep about it probably are not that level just yet. They're staying at a project height or maybe BU height, business unit height, and they're managing it on a sort of interval time frame. But I have started to see this sort of more, FinOps integration at the team level.
All right, cool. Last question. What's your best advice to people right now? How should they be thinking about this stuff? How do I get my arms around all these people that have credit cards and are racking up cloud bills? Are they teenagers? Do I just take the card away or what?
I attribute this as shadow IT. Yeah, that sort of reminds me of every single time I think about this problem. Right, it's like people don't like working in central IT, so they go out and buy their own thing, right? And in this case, you spend your credit card to open an Amazon account and then build whatever tool or product you're looking to build. I think it's actually that's normal nowadays, and I think it's about how do businesses sort of lean in and let people have that flexibility so that they don't feel the need to go around central IT. The way CloudCheckr, other cloud management sort of space perceives the world is give people the tools they need to be flexible. Let them play. Let them create whatever they need that they think they need, and don't create arbitrary rules or boundaries around it, but create consistency in how the business wants to report out and manage to it. So you may have I may create an account that with my own credit card. Right, and then Central IT finds out and they yell at me. But I'll give them access to my account from that point forward, and they'll start paying the bill from that point forward. But I still have the rights to implement whatever I need, as long as I follow the guidelines that the business has set forward. And I think that's a fair compromise, and I think that's a conversation that's happening oftentimes in these businesses, especially around like acquisitions, that happens a lot of like large scale acquisitions. You may be taking on someone else's IT department who already has their own cloud accounts or has their own IT department that they started to standardize on. How do you incorporate those things? Because that essentially plays out same process at a larger scale. It completely comes down to give people the freedom they need. That is the point of the cloud. Just make sure you have the right guardrails in place so that they don't kind of screw the pooch by accident.
All right, guys, you heard it here. We will not take your toys away if you behave responsibly.
Yeah,
all
just wear your helmet. It's fine.
All right. Hey, Travis, thanks for being on the show.
Sure. Thanks, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong TV.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Larry Gordon, who's the CEO for XOps. They are an IT services provider out of the New York metropolitan area with a specialty in DevOps. Larry, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
One of the things that we do see a lot of folks talking about these days is microservices, and everybody and his brother seems to think that this is the best way to build software now. Are you seeing that, A, to be the case, and B, what's so hard about it? Because everybody I talk to seems to get hung up somewhere along the path. So what are you seeing from folks, and what do you know now that you kind of wish you knew when you first started this stuff?
Sure. So we're a young company, and our engineers are mostly young. So they're using the new technologies and the new ways of doing things, new processes. So, and we have two kinds of clients, if you want to break it down that way, in the pharma, in the financial services, in the media businesses. There's kind of the old established companies, and there's the young startups, not necessarily looking to disrupt or displace them, but to build applications better, faster, more cleverly, more agilely, putting features into them quicker than the older companies can do. So they're selling to the bigger players in those large industries. So the young companies are doing everything right. They're going to say Azure because of the security in those particular industries. They're adopting new tools, like CyberArmor or Bridge Crew for security around infrastructure as code, for security specifically around containerization and microservices and CI/CD pipelines. And, we also partner with bigger security companies, the classic ones like Palo Alto Networks or Radware, because these big companies have them in their monoliths. And these big companies are trying to undergo digital transformation, you can call it, or application modernization, adopting microservices so they can do what everybody's kind of wanted to do for 15 years and why people adopted DevOps and site reliability engineering and what I call application reliability engineering, which is our little micro specialty, because they want to get the applications out to market faster, because that way they can, see revenue and profits from those applications faster. Now, the bigger companies have applications that are running internal processes. And those, I think, are harder. And this is why you maybe get stories about why microservices and containerization is harder to do, because it's a different set of engineers. It's a more established set of engineers. It's a application perhaps that isn't built from the ground up for the cloud. So a lot of work has to go against it. Is that work worth it? Are those people the right people? Are the processes they're using agile processes that literally allow feature releases every day or 3 times a week? So I see in my client base, the bigger companies struggling with some of the legacy applications, and we have to put bigger teams on them. The little guys who are building applications to service those larger companies, it's amazing how cleanly the little engineering teams work and get releases done and understand the microservices and the containerization and how to spin up Azure in the right way. And we do AWS and Google and Red Hat work too. But I think there was a little bit of a security focus to what we've been talking about for a while, and people are moving to Azure for the security and because they're used to doing business with Microsoft. So I wanted to add that piece of data for you.
Has COVID changed the way they were thinking about things? When I would talk to people pre-COVID, there was this notion in their head that they were going to maybe take apart a monolith and slice it up and then drive it up into the cloud. And now it seems like everybody's like, hey, we're just going to move the whole thing up into the cloud as a container, and then we'll break it up into microservices later because we just can't get to the local data center anyway. And it seems like their priorities change, but I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, the thing I've seen for sure is clients used to say, I need someone or I need a team on site in my office in Manhattan, in Wall Street. And I'd say, I can do that. And many of our employees live in the area. It's expensive. And so when COVID hit, of course, nobody was doing that anymore. And more people were looking for work. So prices dropped. So a lot of guys were available all around the country, all around the world, able to work on that 24/7. And the clients got better work. They got a better choice of engineers. Everybody's working at home anyhow, and the prices were lower. That's the main thing I saw. Now, in terms of large monoliths versus parts of it, I see more parts of it because that's easier to deal with, and I think a better path to success. When they want to lift and shift really big applications, it takes a while and it's hard to do. But if they could do parts of the application in the cloud that make the most sense at first, that's what I'm seeing the most of, Michael.
Yeah.
It makes more sense.
We hear the phrase DevSecOps now all the time, and I wonder, what's driving that from your perspective? Because financial services firms, pharmaceuticals, they've been all over for security for years. So what's fundamentally changing in your mindset when you hear the phrase DevSecOps?
So what it means to me is that typically they build an application, perhaps in a bit of a waterfall method. So it takes several weeks, several months, goes through testing. Oh, then it goes to security. And then it gets hung up there for a while because the security guys got to do what the security guys got to do. The promise of DevOps and application reliability engineering was that we would build it all into the process. So while our engineers are building front ends, building pipelines, building back ends, deploying applications, monitoring applications, spinning up, spinning down cloud resources and cloud instances, they're also working with the security tools and the security processes, adhering to policies administered by the security group and reporting back, yeah, we're in compliance. Good to go. Yes, we're not in compliance. That means we can't deploy it, fix it, change what we've done so we're always in compliance, go ahead and go. And Azure gives us a lot of compliance buttons where we can meet their needs. What's kind of interesting about it is a company like CyberArmor. They're doing little cars attached to containers or attached to microservices and saying, this set of microservices, it's okay to go. We know where they came from. They've been tested. They've been tested before and unchanged. Easy. Good to go. Good to go. Oh, wait a second. There's a new microservice in this container. Let's test it. Great. Off it goes. I find what they're doing really interesting. And one of the gaps that the customers and tech people outlined to me is infrastructure as code security. So you build your automated infrastructure with Ansible, with Terraform. It could be with Salt Stack, really old, kind of old fashioned, but Pulumi is a new one for the smaller companies. But Terraform is kind of really, we see Terraform everywhere in Ansible. People are building infrastructure as code. That has to be secured. So there's a special tool, like a special platform like Bridgecrew that says, okay, we're going to test and look at and certify all the infrastructure as code you're building is secure as well. So that becomes part of the process because, you used to not have that, right? And now you got to make sure that's secure as well for these industries with high security demands.
When I look at that, though, it doesn't strike me that things are going all that well, because every time I turn around, somebody's got some sort of misconfiguration that they did using a tool like Terraform, and there wasn't any security folks around to verify that just kind of ran, and the next thing you know, there's a port open and chaos ensues. So how is this a step forward?
Well, I think the nature of DevOps engineers and SREs is to want to collaborate. And when they bring the security team into it and realize that security is part of their portfolio, and I think increasingly the responsibility and accountability for DevOps is rapidly shifting, for the application is rapidly shifting to the DevOps engineers. When they do that, less chaos ensues. But I'll tell you, none of this is easy. All this is really hard. I'm an optimist. I've been at this a while. I thought it was going to be easier, and it's not. But,
there's a lot of talk these days about more identity-driven approaches to microservices, services in general. What does that mean from your perspective? I mean, will every machine, every microservice, or maybe every little group of containers get its own identity? And if so, how do we manage that?
That's actually what CyberArmor does. It says the identity of this set of microservices has been proven. It's okay. So I like that. When I heard identity, when you first started talking, I thought about incognito and B2C from AWS and Microsoft. We're doing a lot of those migrations, and they're really hard. And people struggle a lot with them. Then, you have the other identity management companies who are compatible, like the Oktas. And the problem the clients have with the cloud-based identity management people is you kind of have to go out of their application, get your identity, and then come back in. So that's what I thought you were first talking about with identity management, which hasn't gotten any simpler with the cloud. But they're assigning identities and provenances to open source code. Like, oh, the identity of this piece of open source code, has it changed since you got it from GitHub, since we last looked at it? So I kind of put that in microservices and source code identity management. And I like what they do with looking at the identity of where each set of microservices or what's in the container, where it's come from and hasn't been tested before.
Right. But to your phrase, it's all about provenance at the end of the day. And I'm going to want to be able to know, A, what was in my bill of materials for software in the first place? And then B, has this been changed in any significant way? And if so, how? And then that may give me the mechanisms I need to kind of manage security or application security at this level of complexity.
Yes. And the increasing use of open source has made it harder.
Do you guys think that a lot of folks are running around out there throwing around phrases like digital business transformation, and then they go out there and they start building these apps, and of course they want to use the latest and greatest tools? And I can't help but wonder if we're kind of, to use some old New York terms, cruising for a bruising here, because we're going to build these things. They're not going to be secure, and they're going to be, very strategic applications at the end of the day that are going to be heavily targeted.
So I have to be careful of the salty language I use here, because it's not just between us and it's just not a New York crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So not every client, but many clients come to us and people talk about digital transformation and all those buzzwords and a new way to work. And, I thought I knew what it meant. You have this grand vision for what you want your applications to do and how you want your business to be more automated and so forth. And none of that's true. What they come to me with is their application is screwed up and it's broken and it's not secure and there's downtime and they can't deploy more features and they're losing money because they can't get the money from the client they sold it to because it's not meeting the security requirements and it's broken and the features and the interface doesn't look like it's supposed to look like. Our job in my little company, and we're just a little slice of DevOps and DevSec, our job is to unscrew those applications and fix them. And the guys get to work on it, real open, real transparent. I'm going to fix Python backend. I'm going to fix React front end. I'm going to deploy it differently on Microsoft. So people come to us with broken applications is what digital transformation means. It's broken. And frankly, if some big bank comes to me with an application that's 25 years old that runs just fine on those old IBM machines and, requires, this segment of employees to work on it and it works fine and they know how much it costs and it does its job, to the client world out there, don't mess with it. Don't shift it to the cloud because you're supposed to shift it to the cloud. Don't be those guys who sat in a conference room with me for 6 times. And ultimately I said, why are you moving to Azure? And they said, because the boss told us to. And, 5 managers will get in a room and 1 engineer, and the engineer can never complete the meeting because he's always running off because he's the only guy who knows what to do because his pager keeps going off and there's an alert and the thing's broken again. Those are the guys, who should do DevOps and refactor and re-engineer the application. Not if your application's working okay. Don't try.
So treating IT like it's the latest fashion or trying to pad your resume or whatever it is because you want new skills may not be in the best interest of the business. I'm shocked and appalled, Larry.
Yeah. I'm a bad person. I'm not a Silicon Valley guy.
All right. Larry, last question. What's your best advice to people right now as you kind of look at this containers and Kubernetes and microservices and serverless computing frameworks? We promise people simplicity, and as far as I can tell, things have never been more complex. So how do I navigate all this?
Oh, it's definitely gotten more complex. And Michael, we do things that are very similar to things that we did 20 years ago. We gave them a new name and, it's kind of like time sharing in the 1980s, but it's on a cloud, but you get your own instance. And, in some ways it's all the same stuff made more complex. My advice is focus. Well, this is the people I know. Focus on stuff that people are paying for because it's earning revenue, because it's, pay-per-view streaming content, or because it's providing a part of the banking process that wasn't digitized before. Focus on the stuff that companies and customers are paying for that a small team can manage, 5 or 10 guys. When a company, a big insurance company down by you, the guy was, he said, Accenture, IBM said, I need 65 guys. I need 14 SREs. I need 8 project managers. I need 4 senior DevOps engineers, et cetera. I'm like, Nick, you and I know you need 6 really good guys. Focus on what 6 really good people can get done successfully. That's where I've seen success and where I have the least amount of anxiety on working with clients. When they start, doing enterprise-wide DevOps transformations, look out below.
I think that might be some of the best advice I heard all year, is to size the project to the skills of the people you got and go from there.
Well, I think you said it better than me. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Larry, thanks for being on the show. Enjoyed the chat.
You bet. Good seeing you. Take care.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
Bye-bye.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Thanks, Mike. 2 great interviews there. Appreciate it. That's going to be a wrap for today's TechStrong TV. If you're celebrating, happy Thanksgiving. I know it's a Thanksgiving unlike any other for most of us. And make the best of it, though, because next year, God willing, we'll be back to having big gatherings for Thanksgivings and great times. Stay safe out there. Stay well. Stay strong. TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.